If we're wrong, Riot Games, if we're wrong, John Needham, then you won't have any problem accepting an invitation to the Four Horsemen to discuss this topic with us in depth. Balls in your court, homie. Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight, and it is 420. But because we're responsible, we're not actually high right now. We already did that for you in advance. And the joke that everyone thinks is because we were so high, we released it one day early, didn't we? Released it yesterday. We released our 420 content on 419, even though, by the way, I will just say, just because of my heritage, there is no such thing as 420. It would be 24, wouldn't it? Like it'd be the day, then the month. Wouldn't make any other sense with any other system, would it? So anyway, so basically, if you go on this YouTube channel, you can already watch the video we did where we went back and we watched a bunch of cringe content and funny stuff. And also, like I said, we got a lot of like deep lore. So actually, the other thing is, even though we're high, we do a pretty good job actually of explaining a bunch of the details around what was going on with the different people and giving you their little insights, etc. So there's already that video up, but also we are actually sponsored by a new sponsor for our content. And this one is quite an interesting one. It's a company called Liquid IV, where it's basically like a bunch of electrolytes in a drink that you have. I basically think of like replenishment drinks is the sort of vein that we're in here. Tell us a little bit about it, Monty.
Yeah, so I've actually been using this a bunch because I've used other electrolyte supplements, especially for my workouts in Muay Thai, because a lot of it, I sweat a lot in the cardio. But I mean, it also is, I think it tastes really good. You can get both caffeinated and uncaffeinated versions if you like pre-workout or just want a little bit of an energy boost as well. And it hydrates 2 times faster than water alone and has 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. So other uses that people have said, a lot of people in our comments of other videos have talked about how much they like it. I really like it personally, but it's also been used. People have said it's great for if you've been out partying at night, drink it before you go to bed or drink it when you wake up. It makes the hangover quite a bit better, people say. I haven't tested it in that way yet, but I believe it because a lot of that is dehydration and lack of electrolytes, so it makes sense to me. And also, especially with the summer festival season coming up, or if you guys are outside a lot in the heat in the summer, if you're working outside, cleaning up your yard, whatever you're doing, this is great to just keep you hydrated throughout the day. And like I said, tastes really good. Also has 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, vitamin C, 12 different flavors. You can get it nationwide in bulk at Costco. But the best way to support us, guys, as usual, if you want this, is to go to liquidiv.com and use the code LFN at checkout. It will get you 20% off your entire order. So it's been great. I've enjoyed it. I know you've had it too, Thorin. How have you been liking it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I actually do know a little bit about electrolytes because the last few years when everyone was trapped indoors, one of the things I got into was like supplementation. And one of the things that will probably shock most people is actually most people by default don't seem to get enough electrolytes among other like vitamins, etc., into their diet anyway. So I would also say in that sense, if you're someone who's never looked into it, it's good in that regard because you're just going to get like what you need in terms of electrolytes. And then also I agree with what you were saying there. By the way, topical to 420, not just from like alcohol hangovers, but people don't realize weed hangovers are a real thing as well if you smoke a lot. Like the next day, your head's going to feel a bit dodgy. You're going to wake up. Well, if you do that, one, the automatic thing anyway was like alcohol, drink some water. But if you can drink some electrolytes, that's also going to help. And I will also say the interesting thing about the flavor profile of this, I've tried a lot of different electrolyte stuff over the years, is oftentimes the taste is a bit weird, but that's because if you ever try taking just a lot of electrolytes with no flavor, it's a very, very strong, like sort of almost bitter flavor. So what you do is you put in it is. It does taste very salty, which obviously if you're not used to drinking savory drinks will feel weird. So what they do with this sort of a drink is they put like a really strong sweet flavor over the top. So like there's like a pina colada one was pretty good. They nailed that flavor if you don't know in all artificial flavors anyway. There's strawberry one's pretty good. There's a tangerine one. They're generally like, they've done a good job getting the flavor profile. So like it makes the flavor so it isn't hard to drink. So yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Like I'm into that stuff anyway, but just
me too.
It was a better version of what I already was using myself.
yeah, me too. Definitely into it. Like I said, I've been using it for heavy cardio.
It's also so easy. You just literally take the packet, put it when you know the 16 ounces
powder,
of water, you just put it in, shake it up. It's like certain other drinks I drink, and then you're ready to go. There's nothing else you have to do. There's no special technique. It's easy as fuck.
Yeah, and they've got all the scientific studies and nutritional information over at the site if you guys are curious. But honestly, very good product. I've been using it a lot. So really excited for this sponsorship from them. And again, liquidiv.com, promo code LFN, 20% off your entire order. Doesn't go bad, guys. So buy it in bulk now to support us if you want it. Appreciate it.
And they
All
also,
right.
by the way, even do it where they come in like individual sachets. So if you're actually going to go to a gym, it's way easy. You just take one.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not taking like a
That's what
tub
I
and
do.
scooping some out and hoping. You just take the sachet and put this just one
Yeah.
portion basically. So it's super easy, super easy.
Yep. Very good. All right. Well, guys, it's another week and another announcement by Riot. So here's another reason you guys watch Summoning Insight. You're not going to hear people talking about this in any other venue. The latest blog post that was released by Riot this week, written by John Needham, who is the head of esports, all of esports globally at Riot, about the direction of their esports division. And why this is being released now is because the teams are in shambles, guys, and they're needing to do a level of PR and discussion about the future of monetization in esports. And they've dropped some really juicy details in here, including
By the way,
things.
before you go into the details, what I would say when you're setting up the framing like that is exactly what you need to ask yourself is this: what happened elsewhere in esports in the world before Riot did this that could have been impetus? Well, think about it, right? We've got all stories of teams are selling out in the LCS. Maybe they're leaving League. Then the Overwatch League is just slowly collapsing, Titanic style. Like, as all these things go, essentially, Riot there's almost like, I bet there's even a vibe behind this. Like, someone's got to say something. We've got to reassure people. Like, that's just what this blog is, as far as I can tell, Monty.
Well, it's also about reassuring the teams. There was an owners meeting last week with the LCS owners and over at Riot, and people were kind of frustrated, from what I understand, about what was going on. And this has been an issue, as you say, Thorin, because some of these teams are consolidating. Some of them are collapsing. There's been a lot of sale or talk about sales from some of these very popular endemic teams to League of Legends. And also, there's as Riot points out, there's about 93 teams within the global ecosystem of Riot, League of Legends at least, and there's 30 in Valorant, and they discuss both Valorant and League of Legends here. And they do release some details, such as the fact that they have been working on their own streaming platform, which they've been working on for years, guys. But this is another one of those Riot projects that, as I understand it from talking to people, has really hit a lot of delays. And so they haven't been able to fully release it yet. But it seems like if they're announcing it, they might be getting close at this point in time. To be clear, and if you guys want to suffer through this, I would recommend against it. I suffered through it for you, so I can relay the important information. But Travis Gafford does have an interview with John Needham on his channel, and he does talk about some of these things in more detail, but I will provide the color from that. And again, I don't know, because Travis Gafford, the last time he interviewed John Needham, had a do-over where they said, "Oh no, we didn't like the way that interview went. Can you come do that interview over again a different day?" Right. So I don't know how many times this interview happened till they were happy with this one, but the whole thing has been ridiculous.
Just refresh my memory, Monty. You know when David Frost interviewed Richard Nixon and put a lot of hard questions to him? Did they actually just go, "You know what, Nixon," at the end of the first day, go, "You know what, I don't really like the way this is going and the tone's a bit off. Can you just come back and ask me the same questions
tomorrow
so I can prepare my answers and just make them better?" Like, can you do that? Okay. But then when you do it though, can you present it as though this was the first time though? And definitely I didn't. Like, what? By the way, if you don't know, Richard nailed this years ago. This is why Travis is a joke, because Travis will do an interview with Riot. He's done this in the past. Like, he did that one with was it actually Mark Merrill? I think it was Mark Merrill he did it with. And then it was about like the whole like women sexual discrimination lawsuit. And he, no joke, it was like Travis's role in that interview was like he was the press like secretary trying to cover for the president doing something fucked up. It was insane. The dynamic was so inappropriate for a journalist. So like, it doesn't surprise me he's doing that again, mate. It's just the way Travis operates, apparently. And yeah, Riot, to be fair.
I mean, I don't know how to interpret like redoing an interview until Riot is happy with it as anything else than being part of the Riot PR apparatus.
I mean, at that point, let's be real. Here's what we'll do, Monty. By his own logic in doing that, just like when Mark Z talked about how he had to get Travis's approval to put that video on his YouTube channel, essentially, Riot approved even the content of this interview by that logic. Normally, you only approve an interview opportunity, and after that, you have to be a big boy and say the right things. By this logic, apparently, Riot has like editorial fucking control over Travis. Well, then he's not an independent journalist by definition. position is he? You know?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I don't know if this interview was redone or how many times it was redone, but there was an interview with John Needham. So like I said, I will provide some of the color from that. You guys can go watch it if you want. There is some additional information. So basically, it's a very long blog post, guys. I will read parts of it to you and discuss what I think, given the information that I have from behind the scenes and just our, kind of our perception of the direction the industry is headed. If you guys want to know why this is happening on this channel, if you're on YouTube, if you are not on YouTube and you're on podcast platforms, it's on the Four Horsemen feed. But if the last episode of the Four Horsemen with Devin Nash, it's where Richard and Thorin and I dive into all of the business problems with esports right now, which is pretty important to understand why this blog is coming out. But in short, what's going on is that the teams are due to the economy. So a lot of venture capital has been much more difficult to acquire right now. And also when you receive it, they want to see a longer runway because nobody knows what's going on with the economy right now. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank hurt venture capital, at least in the short term. And kind of made the market jittery. And also the ad market is really bad right now. Overall, although it is getting better, as you can tell by our lovely sponsors on our channel. And the other factor has been that esports itself has been in a bad place with investment and PR because especially things like phase clans, stock price tanking, the fact that there have been, at this point in time, probably literally over $1 billion across esports invested in these teams with the anticipation that they were going to grow by now to be like the size of the NBA. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Overwatch League has 0 sponsors right now. We see sponsors dropping off from LCS. We see LCS actually decreasing in popularity, as evidenced by the fact that they had a lower viewer count on the finals. They had a lower average viewership so far this year. So it's bad times. It's bad times. And while I think that Riot is announcing some interesting things, the problem that the owners have, let me make an analogy for you. The problem the owners have at the moment is that the teams that are really in trouble, the teams are like a really fat guy having a heart attack. And Riot's a doctor. And Riot is standing there. And the team is the fat guy having the heart attack. And the teams are just begging Riot for help. And Riot's saying, well, you shouldn't have eaten all that saturated fat for all those years and really loaded up. And the guy's like, help, please, I'm dying. Can I have a defibrillator? Do some CPR. And Riot's like, well, we're going to change your diet. And in 2025, we think you're going to be on a healthier route. And the teams are still dying on the floor. So that's kind of the analogy here for what Riot is doing. I think that they do have some interesting ideas about how to address these issues. And the teams are definitely responsible for part of the state that they've been in, but it doesn't help save them now, which is part of what they need.
Yeah, but here's my problem with that whole premise, right? Essentially, what you're doing there is almost like a libertarian take of like, well, Riot's a company who has their own interests, and each of the owners has their own interests, and, everyone has to be responsible. Yeah, but here's the problem with that is these owners didn't make investments and buy all these top players for top salaries and do crazy, like, marketing campaigns just apropos of nothing. Riot literally implied certain things, set up a certain ecosystem with revenue in it and stuff, promised that over the years they would build up viewerships, make the project bigger, and that your franchise. So essentially,
they would sell media rights.
There were essentially some false assumptions that Riot sort of tricked people. At very minimum, just implied. Sometimes overtly said, but they can go back on it now. So my only problem with that angle is Riot does try to pretend at the end, like, well, it's up to you what you did. It's like almost every single thing in League of Legends esports is bottlenecked by Riot Games' direct control. Like, it's not they try to make it sound like it is this Wild West frontier where if you just come and you're made of the right stuff, you can swing away with your pickaxe and strike a seam of gold. No, this is like there is an enormous seam of gold, but Riot controls all access to it. Don't tell us how much gold there is. And then when you are the guy who's part of their system and you're like, I'm not getting enough gold to make this worth it, you just go like, well, you sort of are. And besides, maybe I'll just reinvent everything for you. That's like what this blog post. By the way, I actually thought the only thing this blog post was good for, aside from us making content on it, is just showing who in esports is an absolute mark. Like if you were one of the people who read this and went, "This is brilliant," Riot's recommitting that, you're just a fucking mark.
It almost reads like satire in certain parts, and it offers very little.
I found it very insulting. The whole premise, mate.
Yeah. And to your gold analogy, Thorin, they're protecting the seam of gold. And what they're telling the owners in this blog post is almost like, well, guys, we're going to find a different seam of gold for you, but we're not sharing the seam of gold that we have right now. Absolutely. Maybe we'll find it. Maybe we won't. Right?
Let me give you a random example, right? Obviously, we can go into some of the specifics. I'll just use this as like a touch point, lightning rod example, Monty. When they tried to set up why they're going to need their own streaming platform and why in sports, broadcast rights is a big deal. That sounds like they're coming to save us, Monty. Brilliant, Riot's coming to save us. But as you pointed out, they already, by the way, have a golden goose. They just won't let us have access to the eggs. Now they're saying we're going to get a second golden goose. Exactly. And don't worry, if you just let us get this second golden goose, and by the way, put all of your careers on the line by going to this new platform, which will start with fuck all viewership, which means the whole sport will go down. If you take that risk, guys, honest, we'll give you a share this time. Go fuck yourself. Because you know one thing I want to say? Let me rewind this whole thing to the beginning. I've got a 1 minute rant for you here. It goes like this. Right. I'm sick and tired of this pathetic approach where everyone in esports, just because either Riot makes the game that they play or their favorite player plays a Riot games, or in some way they're juiced into the ecosystem and directly profit as a result of a Riot games game in esports. I am sick of this approach where Riot can take 1 billion L's and tell 1 billion lies, and everyone pretends like there's some intellectually honest person who goes, no, we can't assume Riot might be lying, or they might be scumbags, or they might be selfish. We must always assume and learn nothing from the past that Riot is a brand new set of people. There never was. That was old Riot. That was the old people. Now this is and every time we have to get tricked by the con man the same way every time. You know what? When people tell me that stuff, Monty, like, you have a hate boner against Riot, why the fuck don't you? What would they have to actually kill women before you'd have a hate boner against them? Would they have to actually wreck everyone you know in esports for billions of dollars, billions more than this, before you hate them? What would they doing make you hate them? Would they have to actually be owned by China and your literal game profits be enriching the country of China and all the things they do in human rights? Would they have to do more than that before you'd even start to dislike them? Before, when they put out a bunch of shite with no evidence and no sources, you go, maybe I'll be critical and somewhat cynical when I read this. You guys are the marks. It's the other way around. I laugh at you if you don't have a hate boner. Like, I already knew half of this shit from 10 years ago. Now it's all even out in the public and you guys still carry water for Riot Games. Why? Like, here's the thing as well. It just gets those like trying to be too fair like that when someone doesn't deserve it also just gets in the way of the interesting points. Like, there's loads in this blog post that's actually very interesting. It's actually essentially, if you can decode it, it tells you everything.
Yeah, and so we have to provide the key, guys, because it is insane PR speak, and this is going to take a while. So buckle up, because we are gonna entirely break this down for you. And honestly, this is a good week for it to happen because there's not actually that many games to talk about. We got a little LPL, a little LEC. But we're basically heading into MSI. So thanks,
and
Riot.
If you like this article, you're high as shit already. You're off your tips completely, mate. If anything, you need to fucking settle it down a bit.
Just full on Riot Kool-Aid. I mean, it's also the way this is written is really hilarious because it has all these details that are just completely unnecessary, such as the start of it is just why Riot loves esports, which is like, I don't care about this. I don't care why you love esports, Riot Games. So they basically talk about the ambitions of the founders wanting admired Intel Extreme Masters in games with esports like StarCraft and Counter-Strike, and yet they didn't learn any of the lessons from the production or operation of those game circuits. And so they wanted LoL to be an esport and have a high-quality experience. And I will say this, like, this isn't going to be all shitting on Riot.
By the way, just as an aside, imagine having the gall to say that you loved StarCraft 2, but then take until like the 2020s before you ever have double a limb. Go fuck yourself. That means you never watched StarCraft 2, you fucking liar. You're just a liar.
Yeah,
I'm not the only one who knows this. You know, StarCraft 2 is nearly all fucking double limb, like except
by
GSL,
the way,
basically.
GSL groups are what we call
Right,
the
technically,
4-team
yeah,
double limb
that's double limb
groups,
too.
and we only started using those this year in League of Legends. By the way, guys, those existed when the GSL started in like 2009.
By the way,
okay?
this is why Riot always tell on themselves, because they can never just say, Monty, we've learned X and we're going to do Y. They always have to pretend we've discovered X and we're inventing Y. And
Thanks, Christopher Columbus.
And so when you do this here, what you find out is that they actually are bragging to you that they've come to an epiphany that I knew before their company was founded. Like, they dare in here. They actually have the gall to say a line in here where they tell us that esports isn't like traditional sports. If you know anything about the stories on this show, Riot Games was the #1 place in all of esports that demanded esports be treated like traditional sports, literally the NFL. They were the ones who made that a completely fake principle, and now they've reneged on it themselves, but they're pretending they're the ones having the epiphany. Like,
right.
What is the epiphany?
I mean, the analogy here is like the Columbus one is good. Like, some of us were already on the esports continent, the natives of the esports continent, and Riot just rolled up like Christopher Columbus and said, wow, I discovered this brand new land. And then they came in with all of their guns and horses, and while we were sustainably hunting the buffalo, they came and almost made them extinct. And so here we are. They're like, wow, there aren't any buffalo left. I wonder fucking why there aren't any buffalo left, Riot Games. But I will say this about Riot. At the time that they started this in 2013, they really did level up a lot of the production, because in the West, especially, this is not true, to be very clear, in Korea, where OGN still was kicking their ass comprehensively in the early days of LCS in 2013 and 2014. But they, ESL didn't have the money to put into this because they didn't have, again, the profit center of the microtransactions, which is the core issue behind monetizing esports today. Because we still do not know what the revenue derived from esports marketing is, because that is a closely guarded secret from the developers.
Think how insane that fact is, Monty, right? We do this ourselves right now in our business. Imagine, Monty, if we could just go to sponsors and tell them, sponsor us, we're really good. And they go, right, can I see your numbers? Well, of course not. Well, no idea. I'd need to know, what revenue do you do? What companies do? No, well, I can't reveal that, but it's very high. Trust me. Like, you couldn't have a business relationship based on that. By the way, it's not even like it also has to be true. We have to have like a ballpark figure at least. Like, they don't even give us that, guys. Like, the joke is they really want us to believe. And if you notice how these posts are written, Monty, they don't give any clue in these posts. Like, they could be making $1 from esports, or they could be making $1 trillion. There's no indication which it is.
But you do have some indications, right? Because they keep running esports. If they didn't want to run esports, they could have outsourced Valorant to an independent tournament organizer like
Valorant
ESL.
Valorant is the canary in the coal mine, Monty. What Valorant shows you is holy shit, wait a minute. They don't even need a franchise fee. In fact, they'll pay you. Bro, we were all on the wrong side of this. That means they're insanely profitable. Yes. Insane. They're making so much, guys. That's the deal they offer us. That's not even like they offer that deal. By the way, if you don't understand, I'll give a quick analogy I've told in the past. It was in maybe something like 2017, Monty. I went out for drinks once with a big NA team owner, and he told me a story over drinks of like, I said, like, how much do those streamers make for you? Because he had some like big league and other game streamers. And he said, some of them make like 40K a month for me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, of course, I only pay them 20K. And then he laughed like, ha, ha, ha. And then what I realized is, wait a minute, that's just Riot Games the whole time.
Yes.
Because the joke here is Riot Games goes, you know what? I'm going to pay you very handsomely, 20,000 a month. And you don't know that, like, you just made them, in this case, it'd be way more than double. You made them like 10 times that or something.
Yeah. I mean, as I've discussed previously, current revenue share on the LCS is about $2 million a team. That's guaranteed revenue for the teams. So, I think LCS is the highest. But yeah, they do that for all of the teams in all of the regions to varying degrees.
Also, here's another example of why, Monty, they can't then keep claiming sort of like, but these bloody teams, now teams, stop spending all that money. Wait a minute, you selected all the people who were in the LCS, you moron. You picked your partners. So why didn't you pick people who said, I'm going to grow sustainably and not blow up the salary bucket? You picked all the people you wanted.
The teams didn't have that choice either. So the back to the fat man analogy, the way venture capital worked was venture capital would give you a pie. So they hand you a pie and they say, here, take this pie, team, but you have to eat all of the pie right now or you get none of the pie. Okay, because they wanted you to spend all of the money that they gave you to focus on growth. So they basically forced you to operate in an unsustainable fashion, because then they say, we're going to give you another pie later. Don't worry, there's got to be more pie. And they would just buy up your company bit by bit, slowly, slowly, slowly. But they wanted to push it for growth because that's what VC did. So it's not even necessarily the team's fault, because if they didn't do this, they wouldn't be able to compete.
It's
with
also
the other
comparable.
teams.
Like, look, obviously the league is the one that enforces the salary structure aspect, etc. But if you don't know in the NFL, you're not allowed to just say, you know what, Monty, my team's pretty good, so I'm not spending any more next year. We're just going to save all our money. Like, you can't. You're only allowed to save certain amounts of cap, and you have to eventually spend them. Like, because the whole premise, like you're saying, is that's the area where people also don't understand venture capital. They think of it as their own personal business. In your personal business, yeah, you'd be smart to sit on a lot of your money and use it carefully.
You just eat a slice of the pie and then put the rest in the
whole
refrigerator.
Point is, in this scenario, as Monty said, they're not investing because they think they're going to make profit now. They're investing to have a very valuable asset that is a foot in the door of a market they want. So as Monty says, they want you to spend it all. So essentially what we did with esports and the franchising system was encourage loads of businesses. Some of them were even quite well run, by the way, to become laden down with debt that they inevitably wouldn't be able to pay off, and they would have to increase the amount of debt. That's why the whole focus now is, what are the revenue splits, or what are you doing for us, or are you going to let us sell skins? Because these teams right now are like, literally, if you don't open up revenue streams for me, I'm done. I'm dead at this point in time. Because that's the thing, when they also implied the same thing, Monty. They had the gall to sort of, on the one hand, be like, they're the reason why esports got big. But then you notice they sort of very carefully, almost sort of like dismissed the teams of sort of like, but they're overpaying now almost. It was almost that angle of like, but then now it's gotten out of control. It's like, you created that scenario. You created the incentive structure, all that shit.
Obviously, it wasn't just Riot, but by requiring the franchise fees, you might be asking, you might be asking yourself, why did they require franchise fees if they're paying the teams $2 million per year? They intentionally created a barrier to entry to get more capital in the scene and to see who is really committed. So it's weird because, and by the way, that wasn't all upfront, guys. They've been paying the franchise fees yearly. And that's what John Needham talks about, is that for certain teams, they've been working with them to like reduce the fees. So a lot of these teams are still paying those initial franchise fees over time. That's true in Overwatch League as well. And that means that, it's weird because they're both giving and receiving money, but they did that in order to have the teams consolidate, to have CLG sell to Madison Square Garden, as Devin Nash discussed on the Four Horsemen, because they needed that upfront capital. So Riot was very deliberate in the way that they did this to get bigger fish into the pond, which is not a bad tactic, honestly. It's not a bad tactic, but it just hasn't worked out now.
Thing is, I'm just done with this thing, Monty. The term I will not allow in esports for the last 5+ years is the word sustainable. Don't ever use that word unless you're talking about sustain in League of Legends in lane with items. Unless we're talking about that context, I don't want to hear the word, because that word has been tortured and abused so much, Monty. It is unrecognizable from the dictionary definition. Sustainable is supposed to mean that it can sustain itself without like external things, for example. What they mean when they mean sustainable in esports, Monty, is I just want to lose a bit less. That's not sustainable. That's why they say, this is the best line of all time, Monty. They go, I want to be more sustainable. No, you're either sustainable or you're not. There's no more sustainable.
It's like
you can either sustain yourself or you can't. And by the way, as you just explained, what you've just explained about capital means that by definition, you are not at all sustainable. You take in someone else's money, spend it, then you have to go and get more money. That is not in any context sustainable. And yet Riot has the gall to act like all they need is a slight tweak to the system and it all runs great. It doesn't. Like, the stupid thing about this is, yeah, I understand the things you said in real life have obviously exacerbated this issue, but this fucking sword of Damocles has been hanging for a long time. It was always going to drop. There was always going to be this market correction. We were always going to have to ask them to do things differently. We were always going to have to ask for more of the cut of the pie. This was always coming,
Well, and that's why they headed it off at the pass with Valorant and changed the model. And
by the way, there's a really funny detail I want to throw in, because obviously we're mainly going to talk about League of Legends here, right? And obviously that's the side we're talking about. But I also thought they absolutely shot themselves in the foot by making this about esports and not about League of Legends, Monty, because it allowed them to do the classic Riot move. Remember the one where they bragged about the format changes, but they made themselves look silly because they simultaneously bragged about double a limb for MSI, but then how it would be like inappropriate for Worlds. And that just doesn't make any sense logically, right? So the same same thing happened in this article, Monty. Like, my favorite part was where they explained that games like League of Legends are like harder to understand than CS:GO.
Oh, we're getting to that.
So then you took CS:GO, the easiest to understand one, and weebified it into League of Legends, you moron. You're right. That Riot is so dumb. Like I say, just let them speak enough, and they were telling themselves.
All right. I do think the Valorant model is good. All right, let's get into some of the details and kind of go down this article.
No, I mean the game. They made the game viewing experience. If you like CS:GO, by definition, what you like about CS:GO, you cannot like in Valorant.
That's the first part of the article. Okay, so let's start there. He says, Riot generally does not use esports as a way to acquire new game players. Yes, we know, Riot. It never has been about acquiring new game players for any esport, by the way. Esports aren't an effective way to do so because in order to really enjoy the competition, a viewer needs to have foundational knowledge of the game. Most traditional sports don't require much knowledge of the game to enjoy them. If you see a ball or puck go into a net or across a line, you know a special thing has happened that you should be excited about. I see people watching LoL esports who have never played the game, and they are absolutely baffled about what's happening on screen. Valorant is a bit more accessible, but it's still very fast with abilities going off all the time, so it can be hard to understand it well. So as you just said, Thorin, that's the core problem, is that the Riot monetization model has made esports that over time are progressively more hard to understand. I got involved in League of Legends when there were 30 champions in 2009. I can't imagine what it would be like to get it to start playing League with 160 champions now. They made their games, Valorant and League of Legends. And by the way, guys, Valorant is, in 10 years, Valorant is going to be just as hard to understand as League of Legends because the way they monetize is by introducing new champions, new agents in Valorant, new content, which makes the game exponentially more difficult to understand because with every release, there's new interactions with all of the other champions or characters within the game. There's more particle effects. There's more things you have to know. And this ties into why younger people, especially in America, are not playing League of Legends anymore. And we'll get to that.
By the way, there's a go on.
No, but this problem, as you're saying, Thorin, the thing about Counter-Strike is Counter-Strike monetized through skins on guns. So it doesn't get more complicated to understand. Yes. This is why Counter-Strike is not exactly the opposite, because I think you do need a baseline knowledge. But if you are an esports fan, you can understand Counter-Strike almost instantly, no matter what kind of esports fan you are. This is why it is the best game, guys. It is the most accessible game. It is the easiest to understand. And in Valorant, even their skins are wacky as fuck. And you're like shooting dragons or some shit.
And you are literally teleporting, doing fucking
flying around the map, like going into outer space.
Yeah, exactly.
Throwing birds at people. Like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, guys. And so while Valorant is easier to understand, it's only because it doesn't have 10 years of additional agents that they've added yet. Just give it time, guys. And so Riot needs, the point of this is Riot needs massive player bases in order to actually have an esports audience. If you think about there's like 150 million estimated monthly active users in League of Legends. And Riot has a party when they get 1 million of those people to watch it. That's less than 1% of their active player base. The conversion to esports is actually very, very bad for League of Legends. So if you compare it to CS:GO, especially in Western viewership, it has a much smaller, I mean, it still has a very large player base, but it has a smaller player base, and it converts to esports viewers at a much higher level. So the other point of this is in terms of monetization, the people who watch esports are often the most hardcore players of the game because they're learning it to improve. They're playing it, they're watching it to improve. And these people are the whales. Riot knows that their highest spenders are likely esports fans. And this is the thing that keeps them stuck to the game and spending. And this is where they derive their revenue.
That's the part, though, Monty. This is the dishonest part about how they framed that article from John Needham. Notice how what he does is he immediately starts, like every magician, with misdirection, Monty. He starts out by explaining that actually esports doesn't bring new viewers to the game League of Legends. So he's already created a distinction between what you do in esports and people in the casual League of Legends player base, right? He's already tried to make a distinction between the two there. And he's even baked into it, essentially, the old Riot refrain of like, we're doing esports for your benefit here. Because in this scenario, he's sort of saying we don't even get new customers. Notice what he doesn't explicitly mention, which must be true by his own logic. It keeps people in the game, though.
And makes
That's
them
what he
spend.
doesn't. And yes, this is the other thing I was going to get to. He then explains later with like T1 skins, I noticed, to make it sound like it's for the teams. He explains how they could use the client to actually promote a specific skin to someone who might want to buy that skin. You've just said the quiet part out loud there, mate. The whole reason you did esports is because if League of Legends was just a game that came out in 2009, Monty, but it was just a game, it would have died like a decade ago now, half a decade. It would have never lasted this long. What kept it going, and you can ask any esports fan, is everyone knows you watch like fucking someone get a penta on Zeri and you're an ADC, you get an itch like, maybe I play a game and queue up. Now everyone knows famously you queue up and 5 minutes in you're like, ah shit, this isn't what I expected because I'm not fucking upset and this isn't a pro game and you know, I was just watching, I was essentially like the kid dreaming of Michael Jordan. Exactly. And we all know that, but that is a real phenomenon. I mean, the joke is that even works on me. Like after I watch a CSGO major, I think maybe I'll play a bit again, and I'll play and I go, what the fuck, I'm finished playing this shit game. So the key thing I think is they don't actually admit that people stay there because of esports. Hence why essentially esports is the lifeblood of League of Legends. They make it sound the opposite way around. Like esports is a parasite on the back of this giant League of Legends wouldn't even be anything without esports. And then the other thing is, notice they already explain it there. Now they try to imply they can help like T1 sell skins. Your whole model from day one was get an esports fan through the door who would have quit League years ago if it was only about League, but he stays because he supports TSM or he watches LCS. Right. Then later you sell him a skin, in this case a T1 skin, but let's be real, for the rest of history it was a different skin that you made all the profit for. So you've just explained how esports makes you directly money in the game on non-esports material. That's the whole mechanism. That's the whole fucking secret formula. That's all we need access to in the esports industry. And just like you, Riot, we can take one set of money and put it on top of another in a big pile in a vault. If we have unlimited in money as well, we can do that. The point is we don't have the unlimited money. So I thought this whole thing, even the way it was framed, was almost to make you not ask that question and to not notice that, like, obviously esports is the best ever marketing campaign for a video game in history, as far as I can tell.
Here's another gem they dropped, which is that 3 of the top 6 selling skins of all time are esports skins, which imply that they're world skins.
Probably
right?
are. Yeah, imagine everyone buys as soon as that shit comes out, of course.
They don't say which ones they are. It would be interesting to learn, but I'm sure they're probably like, just given the fact that esports was more popular in the past, they're probably like skins from, 2013 T1, maybe Type A Assassins, like the first year, because that was the first year that they did skins, because that was those skins were really nice for the time and had a lot of hype behind them. But and have obviously had longer timelines to sell, but also probably some of the Chinese skins, like IG's skins, probably did very well given the Chinese market. So yeah, I mean, I would love to know what those skins are, but we're not going to do that, or we're not going to know that. So basically, John Needham then goes into a pretty good explanation, honestly, of Riot and teams of mutually beneficial partnerships. So he talks in 2017, they started the franchise system, they paid in. He says, in order to pay the 10 million entry fee, professional teams had to raise significant capital from investors. At the time, there was a lot of hype around esports, which helped the teams acquire cash at a very favorable valuation. That's all true. With an abundance of cash, teams could pay their partnership fee and also afford to sign the best pro players to high-dollar contracts. This resulted in player salaries growing at a much faster rate than revenues, and as a result, pro teams' cash reserves were quickly depleted. He does make it sound that it's kind of like the team's fault, but the teams were in an arms race at the time with each other, and also, again, the expectation of that investment was to spend aggressively to create growth. So it's not that the teams necessarily had a choice. They were being pressured by their own investors to spend that money very quickly. So essentially, they say Riot feels a tremendous obligation to our professional teams. Questionable, in my opinion, and we're working hard to support them financially through this challenging time. They say they've.
By the way, what you just said there is exactly why this whole blog is nonsense. It just shows that you can say anything. I mean, there's no one to go. There's no one to go. Wait a minute, John Needham. I mean, what we're no, there's no one there. He just keeps to get going. Goes, and we're also have the biggest dicks in the world, and we're just really charming and smiles. Everyone write their own reviews. Go on.
So yeah, and they talk about the revenue share that we already talked about, but then they say something interesting, which is that understanding the challenges of team business, when we started thinking about the Valorant Champions Tour, VCT, we wanted to decrease the capital required to teams to enter the esport and create a partnership model that fully aligned teams with Riot in developing the esport. In their partnership model with VCT, pro teams don't pay Riot directly, but instead maintain their slot by investing in marketing activities, producing content for broadcast, activating their fans around VCT events, and supporting their pro players. In this model, Riot pays the pro teams a fixed annual stipend, a percentage of digital sales for esports content, prize pools for participating in our competitions, and incentives for incremental marketing activities above the basic requirements. Essentially, we want the teams to use their capital on pro players, marketing, facilities, content, community, and building their business rather than paying Riot. For what it is worth, I think this model is very good. Okay, so Riot did stumble upon something. And to break this down for you guys, what they're doing for VCT is they haven't locked franchise. It is a promotion relegation system, but they will pay you, say, $1 million. They selected their partners. They say, we're going to give you like $1 million. I think it's $900,000 for the North American team, something like that. And you guys, so they give you a leg up to pay for your team. But if somebody in the promotion system comes in and wants to spend a lot of money to try and get into the tier 1 league, they can do that and maybe they'll succeed. So they give people advantages, but they keep you kind of on your toes. And also about this model, so you guys have probably noticed that especially on LCS, they've started taking like teams' YouTube videos and inserting them into the broadcast during breaks. And because the teams like that and it helps promote their teams and portray the team brands in a way that the teams like. Well, what they're doing in VCT is they're basically paying the teams additional money if they're doing a good job marketing, if they use their content on broadcast, if they get their fans to events. And by the way, guys, they have been selling in-game goods. And I think for the last championship, Valorant championship, they said they did between $40 and $50 million of sales of these esports digital goods, which they then shared with the teams. So this is way better, by the way. And I think it properly incentivizes the teams to make good content that is popular and figure out their branding, which has been a massive issue in League of Legends. All of these teams, for the most part, have garbage brands that they never bothered to develop and were never incentivized. Well, I mean, I would argue they should have always been incentivized, but not now. They are more directly incentivized to develop their brands.
The problem is, though, this is where, Monty, it's never as simple as like, we did a good thing, it's just good, so trust us, it's good. Like, here's an obvious reason why people were fine initially with the franchise fee. Because everyone hoped it would be like LEC, and if you were a team where it's like, look, I don't want to keep raising capital and it's not really going anywhere, then you just sell to the greater fool. All of a sudden, like Astralis tried to, you just try and sell your spot for 30 million. You've only spent, let's say, 10 million lifetime anyway. You didn't pay all the franchise fee, you maybe paid 3/4 of it. And so it cashes out, you end up making like $20 million and you leave the spot, right? That's the good thing about the franchise fee. So the problem with this is this, Monty. Yeah, I don't have a franchise fee in Valorant, which means I also don't have a permanent spot, which means also it's very easy for Riot to take my spot away because I didn't pay anything for it and I can't sell anything. Well, here's the problem, right? That was one of the only ways currently you could actually make money in esports. Instead, by not having that option, you're just trapped in the Riot death spiral where they don't ever die, but you all die. Essentially, here's the analogy. What Riot does with all the franchise games, and it's even worse with VCT, is they're the beginning of the Dark Knight Rises and they're Bane, and then you, Cloud9 Jack, you're the guy who goes like, but Riot, can I come with you when you exit the system? And he goes, sorry, Jack, there needs to be a body in the wreckage, brother. The fire rises. And then he goes off to Valorant, or they make it Reggie in this analogy, and then Reggie just dies in the plane crash and with LCS or whatever, like that's what they're doing. Because that's the problem I have with that model, Monty, is now your only way you're going to make money is if Riot actually provides a path. If they provide the revenues and the broadcast, because notice, by the way, as I alluded to before, they're trying to set it up that what's going to save everything is the broadcast rights, which equals their platform, which equals just let us be Twitch. And you know the way we definitely didn't abuse being a game dev. Let us be Twitch, and we definitely won't abuse that. And then we'll just give you all the revenue you need. It's like, I don't know if I believe you, Riot. See that bit earlier about how, fool me 1 billion times in a row and abuse women and I don't have to believe you? I don't believe you, mate. Just a bit cynical. Just a bit cynical, me.
So here's my favorite part of this entire article. You ready for this line, guys? One critical lesson we learned in the first decade of esports at Riot Games is we need to stop thinking about the esports business like traditional sports! ! If
people don't know, the first year of League as an esport was 2011. That was season 1. Do you know how insane that is to say that statement? That's a statement that if someone said in like 2006, I'd go, you're a little bit off the base, but well done. They're saying it in 2023, and they actually, no joke, if this was a real speech, they would pause for an applause break there, Monty. That's how bad these cons are. I'm telling you.
We learned in 12 years that this is different than traditional. I can't handle this line, guys.
And by the way, you have to confirm this, Monty, because people won't be as old school as me. You know the stories back in the day from inside Riot HQ in America. It was all about it being like the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
Everything was justified by the NFL does it like that.
Shut up about it.
Yes.
They wouldn't shut up about it. They were like, I'm a big NFL fan, so I know what's going to be good for esports. By the way, it wasn't that these people worked at the NFL. It's that they were fans of traditional sports and they knew how to apply these things. So here's a question for you, Riot Games. If it took you 12 years to learn this lesson, now, John Needham, it wasn't your fault. You weren't here. Why have you not fired these people? Why have you not fired these people? Why did the real question should be coming down internally. Why has it taken over a decade for us to learn these lessons? Because there were plenty of examples from esports at the time this was happening in 2011, in 2012, in 2013, when you set up the LCS, when you set up your global system. And not only were there examples in other games, guys, there were examples in your game. League of Legends, OGN existed. OGN did not treat this like a traditional sport. You know what they did? Their biggest inspiration, and I can just tell you this from working with the producers, was professional wrestling. It wasn't traditional sports. Caster, the famous guy who yells, Caster Jun, he was he comes from a wrestling background originally and transitioned into esports. The producers looked at WWE and the Japanese wrestling leagues and said, this is more aligned with what our fans want. And you can see that legacy throughout Brood War and throughout the times where OGN produced League of Legends. The shoulder content, the formats, everything like that. It was an entertainment product first. It was not a marketing product. And it certainly wasn't anything like the NFL. There weren't analyst desks on OGN broadcasts. That's a thing the West brought to OGN or to League of Legends in Korea. That wasn't the way things were done when I was there. And so when we talk about this, it's like, of course, it's not going to work that way. And also, just in terms of monetization, you already had a model if you wanted to make this a sustainable product, which is the subscription model that was working in StarCraft and it was working in your game.
I mean, dude, it's the best. You always make this point. It's even the most basic functionality of Twitch. You like the channel, so you subscribe and you get a perk. Like, yes. It's essentially encoded in the very premise of what makes esports big. People going on Twitch and watching contained, like Monty said, a way that they could actually pay for the broadcast. And they did in droves.
They did.
And Riot just came in and said, shut this down. No explanation needed and then left.
Yeah, because they think they want the largest possible audience because it's a marketing exercise. It makes sense why they did it.
By the way, that's a key point I wanted to bring up with you. There's another area where Riot pretends they learned a lesson now, but they didn't, Monty. They just weren't the ones that were eating the cost, right? By Riot's own logic, you know the story Richard always tells that the way that the Overwatch League got that insane $80 million broadcast rights deal, it was in part because one of the execs at Twitch was like friends with someone. Spoiler, he didn't work for Twitch for very long afterwards. But it also was because the claim was Activision Blizzard can just essentially hold us hostage and say all of our games will be on MLG TV or whatever, you know, our own shit basically, not on Twitch. And the point is, if you're Twitch, you don't want like StarCraft, Overwatch, all these games gone tomorrow, Hearthstone, that would be a big hit. Well, imagine if Riot Games had done that, bro. Imagine if Riot Games in like 2017 came to Twitch and were like, look, unless we get the greatest broadcast rights deal of all time, we're just making either our own shit or we're going to another platform. Like, we're the first ones on one of those other Mix or where that came along. If they'd have done that, that would have been in a massive power play. But the reason Riot didn't do that, Monty, here's the key thing. The reason they didn't have to do that and force their way out is because, one, this article explains it here, they run off raw eyeballs. They need the viewership to go up. If you change platforms, viewership will go down. And then secondly, they weren't eating a massive cost. To them, it's the teams that lose the money. Sadly, I'll very quickly explain this because if you don't come from CSGO, you don't have the blueprint for this. Esports works like this. You essentially have 4 layers of people in a hierarchy. At the top of the pyramid is the game dev. They are God. They own everything and can do anything they like unless you have enormous wealth and can take them to court. Then is the tournament organizer. Now, this is tricky in League because Riot sort of is the tournament organizer and the game dev. But in CSGO, it's easier because obviously Valve's the game dev that make the money off the game, but then ESL's the tournament organizer. Now, here's what's unique. In games like CSGO, where the tournament organizer is distinct from the game dev, the tournament organizer is where you start to lose and bleed loads of money. Because if you're ESL, you just pay for all these tournaments, you pay for all this. If you put on majors, unless you're from Romania and just make one guy do 5 people's jobs, you lose money doing majors. Like, it's just cost burn. You're doing a lost leader approach to have your spot in esports. Then comes the team org, Cloud9, Na'Vi, whoever you want it to be, ENCE, could be anyone. These team orgs, unless, by the way, they are, like I just said, ENCE, a small company that just is in the game killing it, they lose the most money of anyone in the ecosystem relative to their size. The team org just bleeds millions of dollars into these players while getting back revenues that are like 1/10 of what they're paying for the players. They're getting back, like I say, they're not sustainable. They're just bleeding out slower. Then you have the pro players, right? Are you ready? The pro player is the other person after the game dev who makes insane profit and has a license to print money. Because all he does is sit at a PC and play a video game, and people in League pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes a month. And that's not even hundreds of thousands of dollars they're making off him. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to pay him to make them $10,000. And then at the bottom is the fan. And you know what the best part about being the fan is? You don't lose money because you don't pay money. You just sit there and get it all for free. And then the problem when we have these discussions is people think these things are conflated. They think that if like Cloud9 loses money, then Riot must be losing money. They think that if the pro player's making money, like Bjergsen makes millions, that means whoever pays him must make millions and millions and millions X times. No, like it's actually a very weird ecosystem in that space. Because I always say this point, I'll tie it together like this. It's why the most inappropriate way to model esports is actually Marxist fucking like labor concepts. Because the whole concept of Marx is the idea that a guy has a factory and he gets you to work as cheaply as possible, so he makes all the money, and because he owns the means of production, like he's the game dev in the scenario, it's his right to do it. And that's what Marxism is, the idea of like, well, the workers should join together and leverage their working force, right? In this scenario, the workers and the game dev are the ones who make all the money. They drag the money out of the scene like this from the fucking teams inside, and the fans, the money goes directly to the top of the pyramid, to the game dev, and tiny bits trickle down, and then the team org pays the players. Remember, it would be one thing if Riot just ran esports, Monty, and they owned the teams and they paid the players. That would make sense, actually. Why does no one ever mention that, by the way? That would actually be a sustainable system. The game League of Legends makes billions of dollars. We pay Bjergsen $200,000 because having top players keeps people playing. That system, even though it would be a nightmare, would actually make more sense than the current esports model. So if people get confused, it's why this whole thing's so weird, because the reason you'll never hear the story I just told you is because it doesn't benefit the team org, who was the one losing all the money, to tell you that story. Yeah. One, it makes it look like shit to the business world. Like, wait a minute, you just lose money out the ass and there's nothing coming in. And then secondly, you just piss off the Riot Games game dev, who is the god of your game. And then, you know what? Then the fucking paddling goes 2 times speed, doesn't it? So at that point, talking about paddling, that's a paddling too. So that's a quick breakdown of esports.
And they don't want to talk about this because it hurts them, because the question, here's the question that comes up, guys. Okay, let's say you're an LCS owner. So you go back for VC right now. Remember, VC is very hard to get. And they say, okay, well, we heard, let's pretend they know nothing, and they just heard a few years ago, oh yeah, esports is growing. And you're like, well, actually, we have half the viewed hours that we did in 2020 this year. And you guys are paying what in salary? So you're losing money, but you have 50% of the viewership that you had 3 years ago.
Do you know that's even money? That's even a part that doesn't make sense about the esports model, Monty. The joke is the esports model would almost make sense if it was like UFC. Like in the UFC, I'm sure you know this, it's not about how good you are, it's about how many pay-per-views get sold when you're on the pay-per-view. If your numbers never correlate, this has happened, by the way, there's been boring champions that were just selling fuck all. You don't get massive money from the UFC. So the real problem in this scenario is, it's like you're alluding to there, because they have done a sports model, they've done a model that's essentially agnostic to what year and what market at it as Monty. So I signed Bjergsen. I'll use him as an example because everyone knows he's a big name player. Let's say I signed Bjergsen for $2 million a year, but actually in 2 years from now, Monty, on my 5-year deal, it turns out esports is eating it up the arse and the entire market's worth half as much. How does it make sense I'm paying him that amount anymore? Like, what was it ever based on, Nothing. It was just based on market value. That was it.
Also, the valuations might be down as
Everything
well because
could be,
with declining viewership, which means you would have to raise what's called a down round where you lower your valuation, which is just brutal. So anyway, let's keep going because he talks about this and he talks about how Worlds has been doing very well. This Worlds achieved a peak concurrent viewership of nearly 74 million fans. It's huge. Average minute audience of 31 million. Like, Worlds is doing well, guys, because it's going fine in Korea and China. This is a Western problem, to be clear, and specifically a North American
by the way,
problem.
That's also a problem, though, Monty, that no one ever talks about, is that when this thing began in 2013, Monty, it began with the LCS. And when it began with the LCS and Riot HQ are American, if people don't know, the whole thing was, right, if you are literally TSM, fucking CLG, eventually Curse became Liquid, obviously eventually Cloud9 bought in the next split. If you're the big teams, this is the place to be for League of Legends. Even that was a false premise, Monty. Not only is this a weak region, but whenever these numbers get bragged about by Riot now, if I'm Jack, right, how does it help me that 10 million more Chinese people watch? I have no access to their money or market. It doesn't have, also, what's mad about esports is this. I can be the biggest Western org and I'm always going to be a bit player compared to like some org in League in China who only are in League. They're not even a proper org. Like, there's also such an upside down industry in that sense, mate.
It's also the World's viewership doesn't help North America because only 3 teams go, right? Yep. 3-4 teams go, and most of them don't even make it past the group stage, if any of them do. So it doesn't actually help you really. And even the Korean teams, guys, are brutally hurting right now. They are brutally hurting because Korea now has the highest average player salary in the world of any league, and the teams don't have very much money. So even Korea, despite the fact that, again, we talked about this on previous shows, they have, 5 times as much viewership this split as NALCS, but they're still in a rough spot. So basically, like, they talk about how, they've done a really good job at Worlds getting value for their sponsors like Mercedes-Benz, MasterCards, Tiffany, Coca-Cola. I believe this, by the way. The numbers are huge. They say we've successfully delivered 5 to 7x our sponsors' investment back in value as estimated by Nielsen. This is all true, guys. There's no question that Worlds is killing it.
Here's the question, though, Monty. In every sport I follow, every good number is on screen and bragged about. This is the problem with this whole thing. He's pretending, Monty, that he's revealing what Riot think. But because, as you pointed out at the beginning, how much they actually make is the real key number that would change everything. He can never tell you that number. So even though the joke is, it's counterintuitive, the number is too good to mention publicly. Because to mention it would give the whole game away and then the team orgs would be on their ass. So instead, he has to, on the one hand, even though in a normal spot you'd brag because you want people in, they're clearly doing great, but they're also not going to tell you as a result. So fucking weird, isn't it, if you don't know what we know?
And we also don't know the math. So when he says we've successfully delivered 5 to 7x our sponsors' investment back in value, the question is that, are you measuring the success as if those 74 million are Americans, or are you measuring as if the vast majority of those 74 million people are Chinese people or from Southeast Asia or people with less purchasing power than Americans, in which case, have you delivered? You can have these global brands like Mercedes-Benz and you can have this massive audience, but it's really different to have 74 million Americans versus 50 million of those people being from East Asia. You know what I mean? And so, like, we just don't know the answer to that, because the obvious follow-up question is, if you are delivering 5 to 7x of value compared to sponsors with a similar audience, why don't you get more money? Why don't you get 5 times as much money? And so the only answer I can come to is either they're bad at sales, or that's not true, or that number has been manipulated in a certain way. All right,
I mean, by the way, just the word value is doing all the heavy lifting there, if you don't know.
Yeah.
If they had just said like direct conversion or revenue, like we all know what value is such a dominant term.
Remember that Nielsen is an American company, so I have no idea if they have good analytics for Chinese viewers. Like, I don't know. So here's the one. One big hole in the esports business model compared to traditional sports is broadcast licensing revenues. The NFL, FIFA, NBA, and F1 make billions of dollars from broadcast licensing deals for their content, mostly on linear television. However, linear television is not and has never been a good channel for esports content because there is a fundamental audience mismatch. Most of Riot's audience isn't watching ESPN and Fox Sports. They're watching streamers on Twitch and YouTube. On the other hand, ESPN and Fox Sports viewers are generally not acquainted with our games, so esports are completely lost on them. True and obvious.
By the way, I will just throw in there, if Riot at any point in time could have had a deal with one of those orgs that they themselves acknowledged no one would watch it on TV, they would have done it and taken the money happily and laughed in the face of Fox Sports as they got no viewers.
By the way, in terms of broadcast rights, in 2016, they announced a deal that was worth about $300 million with ML BAM. That never happened. They were going to stream exclusively League of Legends on the ML BAM platform. It never actually happened. So they did succeed in selling those rights. I don't think they got much, if any, money from that deal. And I think part of the problem was that I believe the ML BAM player was acquired by Disney. And so the deal was killed. But they were trying to find these broadcast rights back in the day. So what they say is, at Riot, we want to be everywhere our players are with content. And John Needham also stressed this in the interview with Travis. Esports are broadcast non-exclusively on Western streaming platforms. The business problem with this model in Western markets is due to a lack of competition and weak revenues from advertising. Streaming platforms such as Twitch and YouTube don't pay for premium content like esports. Here's the thing, guys. Why would they? Why would Twitch and YouTube pay for them? Because esports fans, you created this problem, Riot. We did have on OGN, when you subscribe for HD, we had 25,000 subscribers on OGN in 2013. Imagine how many you could have in 2016 when League of Legends was at its peak in terms of Western viewership. It could have been absolutely enormous, the number of subscribers you had.
I've got one for you, Monty.
Wait, let me finish. Let me finish. So when you have this problem, so they say, oh, well, we don't get broadcasting rights deals. Yes, because you didn't incentivize people or require them to subscribe to the channels to watch your content. So compared to typical streamers that people subscribe to because they like, you created a system where fans felt entitled to the content for free. And then you didn't drive revenue to Twitch and YouTube. And then you wonder at the end of the day why Twitch and YouTube can't afford to pay you for broadcasting rights, because you created a system that was based on marketing that didn't require the fans to pay and drive revenue to them. You made this problem, Riot. You made it.
Here's the obvious question that John Needham can't answer. Why would Twitch or YouTube give any money to anyone in esports for anything? How does it make them money? Explain to me how it would make Twitch more money to just give you some of their money. If it can't, by the way, then spoiler, it's the same argument as to why Riot get to do everything they've done. They're the gods of the game. They have all the money, and we just have to put our hands out and hope for a little bit of like tosses of fucking an arm to the poor every now and then. Like, if you control something and someone else, that's why I brought it up earlier, Monty. Riot have godlike control over League. They could have taken all League of Legends off Twitch. If you don't think that would provoke a reaction, you don't understand the model Monty just explained. If you do that, suddenly it's Twitch that are the ones under the 8-ball who are like, wait a minute, that's a massive amount of our viewership and our model is eyeballs watching. Like, you could actually have done that. So, like, the obvious question to John Needham is, what were you waiting for all these years, homie? Everyone was losing it out the arse. I can tell you, Monty knows this. From about 2016 on, people were losing it out the arse as team orgs. Like, people have needed these things, broadcast rights, for years. That's why, to me, the maddest thing, it's why I have so little sympathy for some of the team orgs in terms of when they complain. It's like, bro, it's been franchised since fucking 2018. You still didn't ever get on them to get this done. You never used your leverage of the... Because think about this, right? If you don't understand, fans, let me explain leverage again to you. So in the same way as Riot can leverage Twitch, the team orgs, the day you franchise, can now leverage Riot. Because if they don't send their players to play an LCS game, there is no LCS. They themselves can immediately control LCS, but they've never done it. They've never once ever withdrawn their labor. They've never, as far as I know, they've had these meetings, but like we said earlier, everyone in League has to always think like, but Riot is good and I would never rock the button. So no one's ever been aggro with them. They just sort of like ask for more things. And over time, like this letter, you get a small concession, but it's never the fundamental change that levels the industry up, you know? And we could have done, like I'm saying, we could have fixed all this shit like 10 years ago, guys, 5 years ago at a minimum.
But here's the most interesting part of this entire thing is coming up, Thorin, because they talk about how 40% of the Western viewership watches via embedded.
This seems like an
Twitch,
absolute lie. This seems like an absolute lie.
Maybe of Western
40%
viewership.
is too high. It's too high. The problem with these stats, Monty, is we're talking about 40% of hundreds of thousands of it. No way. It can't be. It can't be.
So they say with event drops and passes, they say 40% of our, as much as 40%. So maybe that was the peak. As much as 40%
there
of our
you go.
Western viewership.
You nailed it again. That was the part doing all the heavy lifting was as much as, which could mean, by the way, is it 1% or 40? But
yeah. So when they do drops, so they basically say that drops are very popular when the embedded Twitch or YouTube streams on lolesports.com when you're logged in with the account. And so they also say something very critical here, which is we use drops as a way for our sponsors to virtually connect with our fans. And they provide digital codes from sponsors to viewers right through our broadcast stream. So you get in-game items, but they also want to push you. And here's what they're actually doing, guys. They are saying we are not going to sell media rights because we and Twitch and YouTube have made it impossible. Collectively, they have made it impossible. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sell to you guys, the fans. We are going to get you to use our platform, which, by the way, in Travis's interview, John Needham says is not going to be exclusive. So they will actually still broadcast on Twitch and YouTube. But if you want to, on their site, LOL Esports, they are going to use this platform. And what they're going to do is while you're watching the game, they're going to give you little drops, and then they're going to push advertising codes to you. And they're going to pop up on the stream, and they're going to expect you to buy that shit. And that is how they are going to make money instead of providing broadcast rights that they sell. So the entire plan, in case you haven't figured this out, is to make you buy more shit. That's the plan. That's the whole of the plan. And whether that is buying these team passes that they talk about later or virtual tickets, at the end of the day, they expect the fans to pay. Now, they haven't expected this before. And the problem with this is that they created an environment where the fans expect everything for free. And now their one path to monetization is making fans pay more through sponsors, through direct, these digital items for the teams. And here's the real tell, Thorin. This was absolutely insane when I saw it in Travis's interview. John Needham specifically states, he says, He basically says, I'm not doing this word for word because I'm not listening to it. He says he implies that they don't need broadcast rights, and that he says that their core business is selling digital goods, which is true. And he says they're very good at selling digital goods, which is also true. So he says that digital goods sales, he is very confident can be worth, ready, more money than broadcasting rights, which immediately tells you
sense, yeah.
But it immediately tells you that esports must be enormously profitable, because he is saying that we are very confident we can sell hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that media rights would be getting us. We can do more than that by selling these digital goods, which implies that they make a fuck ton off of their own digital goods in esports. And that's where you really start to wonder what the real profit center of this esports is, because he thinks it can be big. Maybe he's lying, but if he really believes that, then that's all the money that hasn't been shared with the teams this year, which is crazy.
It is directly implied, if you look at the scale of the numbers and the years when they said these things, that in CSGO, Valve has made billions of dollars off skins. Billions of dollars. Not on any other aspect, not the game, not selling the $10 version account, which used to cost money, nothing else, not from cases, just from fucking the skins and I'm talking about the esports case. I mean, they're obviously just the skin economy has made them billions. Like, that's why people still don't get this, Monty. That's why League is a free game. Because this what they're selling is the fucking skins and the champions. They're not selling the game. That's where everyone's getting lost here. Riot's pretending quite cleverly, sadly, and it's working, that they offer the game for free to you, and then they allow Dominate to put his whole life into promoting the game, and then they allow Jack to get someone else to pay for players to play in their game, and at the end of it all, they go, you know what? We make a little penny or two from them skins. Do you want a couple? And it's like, that's all you do is sell the fucking skins. The whole thing was you just making billions and billions of dollars off skins. So we never needed even the broadcast right. You're correct. If you'd have ever shared from day one, everyone could have been making fuck tons of money.
But they basically say that they never needed The
Yeah, of
broadcast.
course.
John Needham says they never needed the broadcasting rights because we can make more money selling these digital goods for you. So the question becomes, why weren't you doing this previously? The answer is because they could make 100% of this money previously, where now they're kind of being forced to share it.
I'll give you a great
due to the
question,
economy.
Monty. If you never needed broadcast rights, and now you even know you're not particularly pursuing them, Monty, wasn't the entire franchised LCS in bad faith? Since that was the whole model, the business. That's why people bought a $10 million slot. They thought one day you would sell this shit for. By the way, here's the saddest thing if you're an esports fan and you don't know the industry. When the Owl deal was done for 80 million, people who don't know the real reasons were like, dude, LCS is going to get an even bigger one. Like, it'd have to be like 150 million for LCS. Like, holy shit. Like, no, other way around. Like, no, nobody gets any of it. So, like, if I was the owners, I wouldn't want fucking John Needham saying that publicly. Like, bro, so A, we never needed it. Then why have I got a $10 million slot? And then B, you were just leading me on with the idea you were going to sell the broadcast rights, but you never needed it anyway. By the way, here's a little rule in life. Don't ever do business with someone where their interests aren't actually aligned with your interests. Because, spoiler, they won't serve your interests no matter what they say. They're just going to be incentivized to serve their interests. You actually need people, even if they're scumbags, where their interest, if ideally, overlaps perfectly with yours. Then, even if they're a scumbag, what they succeed in helps you succeed. The problem here is, like you're saying, he's saying the quiet part out loud, which is we're not actually aligned in incentives with the teams. But if the teams do it our way, we'll give them a few more nickels.
Right. And also because it's not going to be exclusive, it's going to be optional for fans. If they really, really wanted to do this to drive as much revenue as possible, they would make an exclusive streaming platform.
Of course.
But they've said, we want to be, John Needham says in the Travis interview, we want to be everywhere our players are, which again is a marketing exercise. He also says in the Travis interview that 12 p.m. start for LCS was better for European viewers because again, they care about total eyeballs. They do not care about
I'll throw something in for you
American
here.
eyeballs.
Here's a mad thing I'm amazed has never been tried. I actually am genuinely amazed in esports. This concept has never been tried, Monty. Essentially, why don't they do with Twitch the same concept of the freemium model of League? You know, in League, the game's free, except it isn't because to get all the game, you essentially have to put your entire life into the game to grind for the points to get the champions, right? In the same concept, bearing in mind, all of esports runs on like total amount of hours. Why have they never made a feature, Monty, where if you grind viewing League on Twitch, it's like it's like you get a sub, as it were, after enough hours. That way you would just get people to routinely just milk all these hours. I think that even Twitch would benefit from that, man. I think that would even be a good angle.
That's actually a smart idea.
Because think about it, then you just encourage people to watch more League.
I've never heard that before. It's a good idea.
Not bad, eh?
Yeah. But yeah, here's their hypothetical of things they'll do in on this platform. Imagine a pro player in a competition chooses a champion you play in League, because remember, it's linked to your account. So if it's your main, let's say, boom, we send you a prompt through the watch platform to buy a skin you don't own for that champion. Do you guys like pop-up advertising? I'm sure that's going to be really thrilling for you. Another hypothetical example is when we see that one of our players watches every T1 match, but hasn't purchased the T1 fan pack, which includes an in-game T1 emote, a special T1 summoner icon, and the T1 fan pass, granting them access to a special chat channel with other T1 fans and the team directly. By the way, guys, if you haven't figured this out, this requires the teams to spend money to support the fan pass because they are going to have to create community programs with staff, with community managers in order to deal with this. They have to decide, do we want to give our fans access to the teams? Does this mean if you have the T1 team pass that you're going to be in a special Discord server with Q&As for the players or other team members, right? So this all has to come from the team. So they are also saying the teams are going to have to spend additional money to provide value. When this player logs in for the next T1 match, we promote the T1 fan pack with details on how the revenue will be shared with the team.
Anyway, do you know the saddest thing about that is I thought the same thing you did, which is even though, by the way, that is actually totally appropriate application of the data you have. Like, yeah, obviously, like you say, you do want to tailor it. You want a T1 fan to know about the T1 skin. I'm just imagining, though, that I'm the T1 fan who doesn't want that skin. And yeah, you're right. I'm a fan of T1. I always watch Faker's stream through the thing. I'm watching all the games. I've got all the other skins. And obviously, at this point, I'm the one who's chosen not to get that specific skin, Monty, but every fucking time I log in, it's like, you want that skin? Hey, remember the T1 skin? Like, even though I'm just the outsider of this, I imagine how annoying that would get.
Riot, in this example, here is actually the best way you can make money. Can I please have an option? Can I please have an option where I pay you money and I don't have to interact with T1 fans? Can I go to a special chat room where there are no T1 fans, where I don't see the trucks, where I don't see their ridiculous whining and terrible behavior. So if you can actually provide me an experience without T1 fans, that would be fucking amazing. I will pay top dollar for that.
Yes.
All right, so it says digital content is some of Riot's digital esports content is some of Riot's best-selling game content. 3 of the top 6 selling LoL skins of all time are esports themes. So they go through this, talk about how they've had success in Valorant, but they also say they can't do skins. Again, it's not can't, it's won't. You could make a skin, you could make a Lucian skin with a different chroma for all of the 100 different professional teams in the world. You just don't want to do that because you want to create really fancy skins like you do for Worlds. So you could make skins for all of the teams, but you won't make skins for all the teams. Also, as people have suggested before,
and let's be real, that would make, again, there'd be no downside, Monty. You would only make mad amounts of money from that. Like, if people don't know, this is one thing I didn't understand myself about skins. The ones who taught me about the power of brands on skins, Monty, was in CSGO when the COD orgs came in. Because when FaZe and G2, not FaZe and G2, when FaZe and Optic came into CSGO, if people don't know, their teams actually initially weren't that good. They had teams that were like, say, like the 10th best in the world. But they would sell all the fucking stickers. And I remember being like, but why? Their teams aren't good and they're not established in CSGO. And what I didn't figure out was this, Monty. Anyone who plays COD who also casually plays CSGO, he doesn't want the Optic logo because he was a fan of NAF or Taric. He's a fan of Optic from COD. He wants in CSGO to have the Optic logo on his gun. Like, it actually makes perfect sense. It's the same reason why, even like, I actually do follow football now, but let's say like I was lapsed for like 20 years in like the Premier League. If there was a thing in the game where I could have bought a Liverpool football icon, I might have bought one just because I used to support them. Like, that element is mad underrated. Like, I agree with you. If every team had access to these chromas, even if, by the way, think of the same analogy, that means that like the CSGO fan who plays League, he doesn't care about Corby, but he might buy the Astralis logo. Maybe he's a massive Astralis fan. Maybe in League he wants the Astralis chroma and the skins and all the icon. That would almost just, again, be a license to print money. There's no downside to it unless you want to control people.
It's also, again, just disingenuous because what Riot does is they just frame things in the weirdest ways. So you can say this is literally it. This is the downside of having nearly 100 teams in our LoL esports ecosystem. But here's the thing. Why do you have to do it for all 100? Can't you do it for just the teams that paid you franchising fees? What about just the ones in the top leagues, guys? Why can't we have a conversation about how maybe the Turkish teams or Brazilian teams or LLA teams don't need their own skins because they have invested less money? And, well, the joke, obviously, is that Brazil now has higher viewership than the LCS. But
no,
in general,
the thing, though, I definitely get your point, because essentially their logic is that actually people in first class can't have better food because people in coach don't get it. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Well, they paid more to be in first class, you idiot. I think they should get a better experience. That seems quite applicable.
You were telling me that some of that $10 million can't be used to hire artists or have your artists make a skin for a team. Like, that just seems absurd to me. It's done in Rainbow Six, by the way. The team skins in Rainbow Six are super cool and very unique. So basically, like, they talk about how they can't possibly do it, even though that's clearly a lie. The answer is they won't do it, but they will do it in Valorant because there's only 30 teams. Again, I didn't make a global esports ecosystem. I didn't force a Turkish league to exist. I didn't force a Brazilian league to exist. Riot was smart with Valorant, and they said there's one league for the Americas, there's one league for Europe and the Middle East, and there's one league for Asia. Okay? Now,
yeah, by the way, the point you're making there is a subtle one, though, Monty, which is that essentially, I don't know why it's never brought up. One of the best things that NA could do is merge with Brazil as a region.
Yeah,
you just bring all that viewership
a lot.
No, but I mean, it's mad that the team owners in NA don't care about it. Like, it would actually help you idiots. And imagine, by the way, if there was no import rules, you'd have even more players to access. Like, it's almost only upside. Unless you're just a fan of only Brazil, I guess. Like, you know.
Yeah, and here's the kicker. The line: having the ability to sell esports digital goods and services directly to viewers will provide a scalable revenue source that should fill the hole left by a lack of broadcast licenses. My guy, you have never had a broadcast licensing deal at scale. You had one in 2016 with MLBAM that never happened. Why didn't you do this sooner? And again, the answer is only that they weren't getting, this is a way they don't get 100% of the digital revenue. And now they are being somewhat forced to. Then they go into live event revenue. So Fandom Next, virtual live event experiences. I don't know if this is some like Web3 metaverse shit, but Basically, a significant part of the traditional sports business is live event revenue from tickets, concessions, and merchandise. Conversely, live events for esports are not a big part of our current business. Another question for you, Riot. You sell out worlds in 2 minutes, charge more for tickets. Boom, done.
By the way, that part is insane to me to this day. Is, you know, in real sports, it's like impossible to get a ticket. You know this. The cost of the tickets are insane in real sports. Like, if you want to go to like a real sports game with a massive ticket, it costs thousands. I'm with you, Monty. Yep. Why? Because as you said before, the dumbest part about this approach, they don't address it in this actual explanation here, by the way, is the real person in esports you need to monetize is the whale, and they do the opposite, Monty. They want everyone in the world watching League to pay 1 cent instead of the whale to pay $1,000. But we know the whale will pay the $1,000. In fact, he is the fry me. Like, please take my money. But they were like, you can only spend your 10 cents like everyone else. Like, they do the opposite model. They've got it completely wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, they're right. Like,
you're right, by the way. Literally, the best seat at Worlds should be like $10,000 for real.
Oh, yeah. Fandom for esports is much more global versus, city-based. The virtual nature of esports doesn't require a big arena or stadium for competitions, and almost all of our viewers are watching online exclusively. This leaves very few ways for teams to monetize their fandom through live events. This is all true.
By the way, what's funny is, though, if this is literally an article every team doesn't want their investors to read. Because if you actually read it with the right eyes, it sort of explains why not only is esports not profitable, but these arseholes are the reasons why.
So exactly. I can't sell concessions. I can't sell tickets. I can't sell merchandise. I can't sell broadcasting rights. But don't worry, guys. Riot says that eventually we are going to replace all that revenue with digital goods that we've never sold before. But because we're really good at selling digital goods, we're confident it will happen.
This is basically an open letter from Smaug to the people of Rivertown as to why they need to really step their level up if they want to make some gold. Because they believe there's a lot of gold opportunities to be made in the region, but they're not quite, doing their part at the moment.
But also, like, this gold revenue stream is going to be unlocked in 2024, 2025. And so I know you guys are like starving right now in Rivertown, but it's coming. Don't worry about it someday. So that's why the owners are pissed, guys, because there's nothing that's being done right now. Because listen to this. We're building a virtual ticket program that will both enhance the fan experience watching our events online and also generate revenue. Starting with Worlds 2023, Riot will test a new product that bridges online and IRL fan engagement. Let's call it the Virtual Pass. The primary goals of the Virtual Pass are to give fans 1, a rich online Worlds viewing experience. 2, a bundle of products and services at tremendous value. 3, more ways to express their fandom and excitement. Our additional goal, support esports teams revenue. So it'll feature a bundle of digital products, World Skin exclusive variants, in-game event pass, plus some exclusive content, unique physical products, exclusive Worlds merch, which I guess they send to you, and physical and digital goods from our sponsors. Honestly, sounds good. But again, guys, this is Worlds 2023. What happens if you're an LCS team now that needs money now? Like, when is this coming to local leagues? Like, it's great that it's happening for Worlds at the end of this year, but guys, that's in fucking 6 months, and you have to make it to Worlds to unlock this revenue. This only helps the teams that go to Worlds. 80% of the Worlds teams are not even going to be there. So where's the money now? So they say that this is happening, and in 2024 and beyond, we want to expand the offering in LoL Esports and introduce Virtual Pass to VCT. Again, this sounds good. Like, if you have a good...
Here's another way to model it, Monty. It actually does the opposite of what they're pretending. They're pretending this additional revenue stream allows you to be more sustainable, right? As you just explained, you essentially have to, in the game, compete to get access to it, which means you're incentivized to spend more money on better salaries, on better players to get the spot. In which case, if you spend
more... to get to Worlds to get it.
Which means you will spend more money to get a little bit more back. How does that ever work out? Like, you actually might end up spending more than you get back off this.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, think about it logically. This actually means, in theory, you should do what Steve did. You should make a super team to ensure you get there so you can activate.
And here's at the end, it says, we're intentionally building this virtual pass in a way that we can have team-specific versions with team-branded virtual and physical goods, and maybe even pro team room access. I assume that means a camera in the room during the matches, exclusive chat channels with pro teams, and the ability to interact with the players. Again, this requires the teams to do additional things and spend more money in order to create these systems. If we design this product right, it will deliver a great it will deliver great experiences and connect fans with their favorite players and teams while simultaneously creating a new revenue stream for teams. I mean, it's possible that it does this. Like, again, the idea sounds good, but it's so light on details and with no real timeline for implementation. Notice they said they're going to start it with Worlds in 2023. They don't give a timeline for putting this in the LCS or the LEC or LCK or LPL, right? We don't even know if that's going to be 2024. What if it's 2025? How are these teams supposed to survive without this plan? Because without the details, which they don't seem to have, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And that's the problem, is it's all theoretical. And yeah, they could have their own streaming platform, but is it ready to launch yet? Like, why hasn't it launched already? Why is a multi-billion-dollar company taking so long to design a non-exclusive streaming platform?
By the way, I just want to make one thing clear here. When Monty says John Needham wasn't here at the beginning doing all this stuff, let's just be real. The way he wrote this message that he put his name to shows he is one of them, Monty. He is disingenuous. He will frame things in a way where he knows you will take the wrong conclusion, but it's the one he wants you to take from it. He doesn't actually address the real problems. He doesn't essentially tell the truth in most scenarios. He just doesn't overtly lie. He tends to just omit the truth. So he's not maybe as bad as the worst ones at Riot, but he's definitely more on their side, tipping over to their end of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, they also have had plenty of things. I mean, they even reference the internationals pass in this article as a way for generating revenue, which is another thing that people have wondered why.
By the
Riot
way, here's
doesn't
what's
do for the
amazing,
world.
Monty. Here's what's amazing about saying that is, do you know one of the first internationals to start popping off insanely with like the crowdfunding was in 2014, bro. 2014. That was 1 year after LCS began, and he's talking in 2023 about a pass. How far behind are these fucks? That's the worst thing about them, like I say. They're not only so far behind, but then they always pretend they invented the wheel when they finally catch up and start using it. It's so dumb, isn't it? It's so dumb. It's always the same MO, same playbook every time.
Yeah, again, like, it's a lot of this. John Needham wasn't around for this. Like, he was a more recent hire to lead this division. But the question is, why hasn't he just cleaned? If he recognizes that these problems existed, he should have cleaned the house in the esports department. I don't understand why.
You'll know this, Monty. In real sports and things like TV networks or like sports, if people take a big gamble, like Riot's done many times, like you take a broadcast rights deal or you do if it doesn't work out, you almost certainly get fired. That's just standard. Like, you essentially gambled all the company resources on one approach that was failed and brought all the number. You just get fired, and you get fired, by the way, publicly, like you're saying, to make like a public mark of like, right, this was the guy responsible, but don't worry, we've got rid of him. You're even communicating that your investors sort of like, don't worry, we're taking care of it, and we're good. And that, because it was him who had the idea, he's gone, so that ain't gonna happen again. Riot never does that ever. Everyone who's shit, just like the joke of Riot is you really do get, you just fail upwards. You just get an even better job. Like, half of the people who were shit in Riot games for League, and now in Valorant, unironically, they're just in Valorant doing their shit again. It's like these fucking demons just never end.
Well, it's also hilarious too, because in the Travis interview, they talked about, Jackie Felling's retirement as, stepping away from being commissioner.
I didn't know she ever began being the bloody commissioner. I thought she was still thought she was doing a warm-up lap still. Fucking hell, love. When did you ever post anything as a commissioner? You were just on Reddit all day. You're just a fucking Redditor.
So
she should have here's what I want. Petition for Jackie Felling to get an LCS commissioner emote on Reddit, because that's all she ever was, the commissioner on Reddit. There you go.
I think, but he asked her about who, Travis asked him about who would be the future commissioner. And he basically said, well, we're evaluating, internal candidates in order to take over that role. And we have, he said, I can't imagine that there would be an external candidate who could match up with the experience of our internal team, which again says that
200 years of experience, technically.
But it's like,
are you 201 years old? Then you can't possibly be the commissioner. But they got us again with the Aphelios.
You can't imagine that there would be somebody else outside of Riot. And remember, he's talking about the people who made all of these mistakes, right? And by the way, objectively, I am more qualified to be the candidate of LCS than any internal candidate at Riot, because I've been a commissioner and I've been in esports for longer than any of those people. I've literally done these jobs. Now, of course, they're not going to offer me that job. And of course, I'm not going to apply, and I don't want it. But I'm just saying, there are objectively many, many people outside of Riot who have been in esports for longer than anyone has been at Riot, who have more experience and are more in tune with this shit. Remember how Jackie came in and changed the broadcast this year? Well, we all miss Dash. She was the one who made the broadcast much more compelling creatively, and she led that team. So you literally just had an external candidate that fixed a bunch of the bullshit that everyone previously within your company had insisted we be like traditional sports. We do this with the broadcast. She made a much better content. She made much better content with the broadcast than had been for years in the LCS. And she was an external candidate. So I thought that statement was also just outrageous. I thought it was outrageous. The answer is that here's what they don't want. They don't want to hire an outside candidate who might introduce new ideas, and they don't want to pay a premium. Why do that when they can just shift the work on to somebody else that they don't have to raise their salary or do a minimum increase in their salary within the LCS? That's why. So hilarious. Now, I know this has taken a long time, guys, but sometimes we have to serve you the medicine. It may not have been the most chill way to start your 420 with all the yelling of this article, but this was the only place we were going to be able to discuss this honestly. And we've already had Power Spike and Best Damn League Show this week to discuss a lot of the gameplay that has occurred, guys.
Plus, Monty, it is 420, and there is a way that people could, sort of chill out after this episode. Yeah, especially chill out. Bring the temperature down a little bit. Like if they feel like they're getting too hot under the collar and getting irritated at all this Riot bullshit, and they don't want any of the smoke, then what they could do is use a freeze pipe at thefreezepipe.com, code LFN for 10% off. Because what you do is you just take the food safe glycerin chamber, you put it into the freezer for a mere hour, and after an hour, your smoke will be cooled. It won't annoy your throat anymore. You'll just get to enjoy the nice parts of smoking. As I've often said, make your cannabis experience into a cannabis experience. Thefreezepipe.com, 10% off with the code LFN. 420.
Yep, that's right.
YOLO swag, 360 no scope, MLG, all the other things from 10 years ago.
That's right. And some of you guys, it's too late to get it for 420, but you're using your nasty old bongs or pipes right now. Get a clean new piece of glass. Treat yourself. So yeah, sorry. Again, guys, we didn't know that.
Here's the thing, Monty. Despite what people might claim about certain advertising categories, actually, the oil rigs that they sell on FreezePipe are the kind of oil rigs that maybe do belong in esports. Evil geniuses. That's straight fire. So go look that one up. That's pretty good. Go look that one up.
That's very good. That's very good. Not Chev. Hashtag not Chevron.
Exactly.
But yeah. So yes, thank you guys for supporting us. You really have been crushing it with the FreezePipe sponsorship. So,
and also, by the way, to actually tie it to a more serious point, this is why, by the way, the LCS is garbage and makes fuck all money, because two esports boomers with zero production value just made an ad that was about 1,000 times better than anything that ever appeared on the LCS and made you way more likely to buy the product.
I bet you we've sold more freeze pipes than they did. I don't know, whatever. Any sponsor on the LCS signups, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
mate, we've made more money for fucking bongs in esports than fucking broadcast talent work. That's straight fire. If you think about the other meaning of bong, that's fucking amazing. If you know Brit bong, I'll serve it up for you. There you go. There's the spoiler. It's pretty good though. Go on, keep going.
Okay. So thanks, guys. We can talk about some games now. I do need to chill out. So this was a good break. And again, that lasted a really long time. So thank you for bearing with us. We are trying desperately to inform you about what is going on to fight the tide of Riot PR statements. By the way,
I'm actually going to start doing, Richard obviously doesn't, but the problem in his is he can never be on Reddit, right? I'm actually going to start doing more than myself, because I've realized, even though to me and you it's easy, dude, there's actually mad value to people when you sort of just break down a statement. They don't really know all the weird elements, because you have to know all the behind the scenes, fucking inside baseball jazz, don't you? So I'm actually going to start doing more of those. I know it's not super high effort content, but it actually is necessary. I agree. You need people to sort of translate it for the people.
Yeah, and if you don't know the specific problems that exist in the industry or Riot's history, you might be newer to the game or not, fully paying attention, we do try and do that. That's the power of Last Free Nation. That's why you guys should subscribe to us, by the way, on all of our platforms. Follow us on our podcast platforms, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcast you use. Subscribe to us on, follow us on Twitch, subscribe to us on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So we can tackle some of these industry issues. Thank you for listening to it. We do appreciate it. We know it's not the most fun. Well, you guys probably like watching us rant. That's honestly us being salty is probably at least 50% of why you watch this show. But yeah, I honestly, I guess in summation, I hope Riot's right. I do. Like, I'm interested to see what they come up with the digital content. I'm interested in their platform. This could be very good because obviously with Twitch's monopoly basically on the esports infrastructure, we do need disruption and competition in order to challenge them. It's been a massive problem. And at the end of the day, it's not just a Riot problem. It is a combination of the lack of competition with Twitch and YouTube, Riot being incompetent, and then also the teams spending like drunken sailors and putting themselves in this position. So everybody is kind of at fault here. Also, as we discussed on the Four Horsemen, the insane neglect of value for advertisers. Like, I'm sure the advertisers at Worlds get value, but the teams have done, for the most part, a really bad job of supporting advertisers, and so have the leagues, the local leagues to a certain degree. So it's a perfect storm of bullshit that's happening right now, and everyone deserves a share of the blame, not Riot. And I think at least Riot appears to be doing something, and this could be very good. It all depends on execution. We don't know. It could be very good. But when is it going to happen? Not soon enough for a lot of teams. And here's the other factor, Thorin. I actually don't think Riot cares about the teams. I think they are not concerned with what is happening right now because in their eyes, they are seeing consolidation of the teams like CLG and NRG basically merging into one entity. They're seeing FlyQuest be purchased by a different traditional sports team owner. And they're seeing, influencers come into the LEC and start to be part of this. So they probably think this is all a good thing. Like, they probably see this as some sort of, capitalist Darwinism of, they think that
when those articles, when they do those Forbes valuation articles, Monty, I would guarantee you Riot reads those as if that's actually the money those teams are making, not just like an imaginary. They're like, oh my, TSM's, I knew we did a good thing making the LCS. Like, I agree with you, mate. Like, to me, this is where Riot always give the game away, but then somehow they put the fucking genie back in the bottle. It'll always, I know it's because you guys are just plebs, but I don't know how they do it. Like, that Mark Merrill statement, which actually spawned the whole thing where the team owners forced the LCS, that is their real opinion on Team Orgs, which is essentially, you're just here to make me money. So why aren't you making me even more money? But sir, I'm losing money. No, you couldn't be. You're in my magical Riot Games paradise. Now give me more of your money. That's actually who Riot Games is, guys. And then the thing they did to Dom, that's what they think about the rest of the scene. That you guys naively think that they give Emily Rand a job on the LCS because they really appreciate that she's dedicated like her whole adult life to watching League of Legends, studying League of Legends, like essentially like modeling the way League of Legends works as a meta, as a game. No, they do all that stuff, by the way, because they actually think like essentially they're doing her a favor. They're like, oh no, you know what, Emily? We're actually very happy that you've been allowed to dedicate your whole adult life to almost no money from us. So you know what? We're going to pay you a salary now. Come on the broadcast. Like, they don't give a fuck about anyone in this space, mate. That's why the clever thing they'll do, and I'll give them props for this, is they hire people like John Needham. Because here's the thing. If these things came out of the mouth of the Mark Merrills of the world, you wouldn't even get through the PR statement. John Needham knows how to make it sound like it's actually good. He actually makes it. If I didn't know it myself, Monty, some of that shit, I would get tricked on and go, oh, maybe they are. Maybe they do think it's good now and they are changing their mind and they understand the importance. It's like, no, but his job is to make it seem like they do. Because I don't, like as we said, by the way, you can rewind the whole thing. They were always making so much money, it was ridiculous, from the game and the skins, that essentially the whole thing should always been about, can we get some of it? But instead, they tricked everyone with this whole side detour of, it's a bit like sports, and there's a broadcast rights, and there's the buy-in, and that was all just some fucking shit for the last 5 years, that in the end, we've come all the way back to like, yeah, it turns out, actually, if we just gave you more share the skins, we all make money. Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks for that. I was just about to lose my ass. But yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
It was just a mirage that they told you. It was like, hey, guys, there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And then it took a long time to walk to the end of that rainbow. They're like, don't worry, there's a pot of gold. Oh, shit, there's not a pot of gold. Well, there's going to be a pot of gold in 2 years, guys. Don't worry about it. There's a new rainbow. Don't worry. So we'll see, I guess. But not to be trusted. There's also some leaked news that looks like, according to Berserker's stream, by the way, Thorin, that LCS may
By the
be.
way, one thing I'll just throw out there, because I actually want to do this. Here's what we'll do, Monty. I did learn one thing from Richard, though, about Riot that does work, which is if they ever claim something themselves, Monty, and you hold them to it, you can actually shame them into doing what you want. So the classic example, actually, is Jensen. If people don't know, when Jensen was Incarnation, when they banned him for life, the intention was he was banned for life. And it was essentially just sweep him under the carpet. You never have to worry about him again. But what people realized, including the person who became his agent, was, wait a minute, but they claim they have a rehabilitation system in League, though. So all they did, I'm going to give you the secret sauce here, is they just kept going to Riot over and over again and going, right, what else does he have to do? And Riot would do all that nonsense jazz of like, right, you've got to write like a letter about you're sorry, and you've got to have so many months without. And so what they did, though, this is how clever these guys were, was they just kept doing it. They just kept doing it and then coming back and going, right, we did it. We did the 6 months, so now what? And then Riot, because they were going like, well, fuck, I didn't expect him to do it, so I guess do this other. And then eventually what happened was, because it was the right person as well with Cloud9, they were able to get him unbanned and he was able to come back and he was able to have this pro career. Essentially, you should do something like that. So here's how I'm going to spin it the other way. If we're wrong, Riot Games, if we're wrong, John Needham, then you won't have any problem accepting an invitation to the Four Horsemen to discuss this topic with us in depth. Balls in your court, homie.
Yeah, and there won't be do-over interviews like you've had in the past.
It's
and
live. You can't do it. We're like fucking Bill O'Reilly. We just do it live. Fuck it.
I'll also ask him a very important question, which is that if Riot has such insane internal candidates to promote to new positions like commissioner, why did they hire John Needham, an external person, instead of promoting an internal person to be global head of esports? Why did they hire you, John? Big question. So anyway, as I was saying, to move the topic, we did hear on Berserker's stream, he implied or leaked that LCS may be opening up, or Riot may be opening up to 3 import slots for the coming year of League of Legends. So basically, teams will now be potentially allowed to have an additional import player on their roster, which of course is only going to benefit North American teams. Maybe some Chinese teams will have 3 Koreans.
You fans and team orgs genuinely didn't just spend the last 5 years gaslighting me that it was all about developing NA talent. And now you're going to ensure that you're eligible to use less NA talent.
It's even better. In the Travis interview with John Needham, Thorin, you ready for this one? John Needham says that all 10 teams in the LCS voted to abolish the requirement on having a Challenger League team. And so they are no longer going to be forced to field academy rosters because they cost, $500,000,
which was
a
key component
a
of the franchise. And remember that you had to have one. Yeah,
correct. So now, as of next year, teams are not going to be able, or are not going to be forced to have these rosters. Now, I will say that a lot of the problem here is that because Riot makes the challenger rosters be in California, it is much more expensive because of California payroll taxes, cost of living, etc., to maintain these challenger teams. Now, if they could live in Las Vegas, it would be a lot cheaper. But Riot says, no, these people have to be in California, et cetera, et cetera. And, they have to be employees of the team, et cetera, because they are in California. So that's been a big point of contention between the team owners and the league. But also, this is an admission of defeat, because the other thing John Needham didn't address in the interview was what Nadeshot said publicly, which is that young people in North America aren't playing League of Legends, which means that there is a dearth of potential professional players in North America because the server is not that big. And also, to go back to the original point of John Needham's article talking about why people watch esports, now League of Legends is so complicated that if you don't have an insane will to play the game and learn everything about it, because the barrier to entry is so high. Now it works in Korea because everybody plays League of Legends, so there's people to help you learn. But if you're just on your own and your friends aren't playing League of Legends, and your entry experience, because remember, there isn't a good tutorial system. The ladder is full of bots and smurfs that are making new accounts, and they're leveling accounts to sell. It is very difficult to learn the game unless you have a community of people to help you, which exists in China and Korea. It does not exist in North America. And so this is an admission that we're not going to get new North American professional players, or there aren't going to be very many of them. And so in order to keep North America competitive, we are going to have to import an increasingly
so it's
large
only for the
number of
LCS
players.
region.
It's for everywhere. But LCS is obviously going to be the only league that really takes advantage of this.
To me,
Maybe China.
The obvious one's the LPL. Like, if anything, you just made the LPL even better.
Possibly.
Remember, now in the LPL, this is how mad this is now. Dude, now in the LPL, you can have all 3 carry roles be from Korea. So now your team can be the Shy, Rookie, and Ruler all at once. And by the way, just think this through. Because NA gets to have Jizuki and Inspired and Impact, they're going to beat Shy, Rookie, and Ruler in this analogy. That helps them get closer. They're further away by that logic. What the fuck?
Yep.
And by the way, this is also an example where Riot never think about the ecosystems as if they were sustainable. Because here's the knock-on effect from that, Monty. When you now make China even more powerful, you've just increased the salaries for LCK teams again. They haven't done anything different, but today you just increased the salaries for them. Because now to compete, they also have to pay more money for more people. Like, you actually, so to help LCS, we're going to fuck every other region in the ass. I mean, that's why I almost said that naively, as though like, let me just consider that premise, as though that wasn't the whole way the game ran the whole time.
I'm sure Tencent's really concerned with China getting more, popular and powerful in League of Legends, Thorin. I'm sure Tencent's really worried about that. But yeah, to your point, like, if you're going to do this again, why not just implement the Super League? Because Riot, in John Needham's post, outlined that one of the big problems is that they have 100 teams, so they can't properly service them like the 30 teams in Valorant with digital goods. Why can't we have a Super League with no import restrictions where you hand pick your favorite franchise owners and you put them together in one league so that we can actually all follow the professional scene instead of it being broken across the entire world with very few international events? If this is the path you're going down, can we please just get to the logical end point of it already, as opposed to just saying that, oh yeah, there's basically no import restrictions anymore, especially because in North America, there are now enough resident players that it's even easier to fill a roster with entirely foreign players, which again, I don't buy the fact that people actually want North American talent.
They don't.
Because Bjergsen was immensely popular.
For me, for real, I think sadly we're not going to get to see it. But the best example would have been FlyQuest. If FlyQuest's team really had have been banging at this MSI, Monty, they would have been mega popular in my opinion. Everyone would be loving them, of course.
Yeah.
The joke is everyone is like the biggest Prince fan of all time. Everyone loves him.
Nobody is complaining that the majority of NHL players aren't American. They're Canadian and European, because these teams are very popular in America, and these players are very popular even if they're foreign, because they create the best product and they win the most important competitions on behalf of their American cities.
Some of the fucking Russian players are still insanely popular in spite of the current world context. By the way, they should be. They're not connected, but that I agree with you. Like, as long as you're a really good player, overpowers your nationality, of course.
Look, man. I promise you that Nuggets
by the way,
fans
it even works
don't care that Jokic is Serbian.
The best example is actually the LPL. Dude, those LPL fans really do cheer for you if you're rookie more than if you're scout. Oh, scout's also Korean. I'd have to use like Zhao or something. Zhao's won loads of tournaments too, but if they think rookie's the best, they love having a rookie on their team. Like, and by the way, compared to America, China's a significantly more nationalistic country. Like, you'd have to go back in time like 60 years to get to that kind of fever in America, so that just proves it. Yeah. So the sad thing is, this is better for competition in terms of like the level of LCS teams, Monty. But you are right. This is essentially an admission. Like, the whole like develop any talent thing, that's over. Like, that ends today.
It failed.
Let's not even pretend it's a thing. It's like you say, it's not only over. It could never have worked anyway. So why bother, basically?
Well, it's just true, because again, guys, it was never about Champions Queue. It was never about work ethic of it kind of was about work ethic of the players. Let's be real, but it wasn't really about that. It was about the fact that the competitiveness of the server is bad because it's a smaller population. Okay, that's it. And we can't fix the geographic realities or the number of PC gamers within the United States. There's just more console gamers in the States. It's why we see the fighting game community, the American players from there, doing much better on the international stage. We know all of the reasons behind this. Like, I promise you, when Project L comes out, the Riot fighting game, Americans are going to do much better internationally in Project L than they do in League of Legends. That's just how it's going to be. And it's very easy to predict this stuff.
Why is it called that, though?
They don't have a name for it yet.
Was that the original code name for the LCS, Project L?
Project L.
I can't handle that. It's too much.
So like, I don't really have an issue with this, especially if it does make LCS more competitive. But the usual suspects, as I understand, have been banging this drum. So Reggie has been at Riot's throat again, talking about how they need more import slots, which is hilarious because he doesn't even want to pay his players. So like, just pick a take, Andy Din. Like, do you want to spend money on League of Legends or you don't? And that's his like constant quandary, is that he can't stand the idea of losing in League of Legends, but he's being faced with the reality that he also can't make money. So what he does is just yell at Riot. That's what he does now. But yeah, this is the whole thing, guys, and we should expect this. And I think it was inevitable, really.
By the way, I have another angle.
They also can't just make the 3 import rule for LCS because it's unfair to the other regions. So if they do it, they're going to open it up to the entire world. Again, these are leaks. These are leaks from Berserker's stream and things that I've heard might happen. So I don't want to present them as if they are going to happen. I just think they are likely to happen.
By the way, I did a tweet about this earlier today, but I always think an element that's really missed about the LCS is when I made that video like 2 years ago or something, where I explained that like the main thing the LCS lost was they already had the WWE superstars in Doublelift and Reggie and Hotshot and Saint and all these players that everyone revered and had enormous drama and storylines. And they not only already had that, but the angle that kills me, Monty, is when people talk about the broadcast like it has to suck because the region sucks. You know that joke I made earlier about how essentially Brits in esports don't succeed in the game. They're just all the broadcast talent. We're like Thanos of fucking broadcast talent because we've got the accent and we speak the language and we have the banter style. So, right? Essentially, the same is true, by the way, for Americans in League of Legends. Guys, let me just name a bunch of people for you. I'll even throw in ones I don't like. But so we'll go like Dracos, Monte, LS, Loco, Dom, Doa, Froscorin. All these people are from North America. All of them. They are all Americans. Maybe one of them's a Canadian or something like. They're all Americans. In theory, if you made the broadcast appealing enough in terms of the compensation, the creative element, and they made the league cool, the main region they should want to cast and work on is the LCS. The dream for all these people should have been one day to get the best gig on the LCS. And the LCS would win in all other regions by having the best broadcast talent. Instead, notice how many of those names there have never worked on the LCS. Or did, and then, because I was thinking about this the other day, dude. You know when we did that cringe content where we were all laughing at that old Loco interview? I still think that was the canary in the coal mine to me, that the LCS broadcast would never be fun. When they actively kicked Loco out, you know him, mate. He would have done it for free, mate. That's how ridiculous he was. He just actually loved the LCS, and he was a great addition to a broadcast. Because as we've shown, what makes Loco amazing is he's mega entertaining, even if he's wrong. It's actually really entertaining. Like, he's one of those guys. It's a bit like, you'll know this reference. He's a bit like Moses in CSGO. If you add them to a group, it only makes the group better. They're like the yeast that fucking like permeates the whole thing and makes it rise. Like, they just make every circle more fun, more angle. And both of them, you notice I pair them in this way as well. They can both be the one who takes the L. They can both be the one who's the butt of the joke. And they're actually, you can take it and make the broadcast better. Like, I even think that aspect is so short-sighted. Like, look at, like, forget fucking LCS teams, Monty. Look how but a bad job LCS broadcast has done with NA talent. Real NA talent. Like, they had to know, like I said, some of these names, by the way, the best in the world. Throw in some other ones. Papa Smithy, if you know the story of Pistrap, he would have been on the LCS if you'd let him be. Fucking, you could throw in a whole bunch of the people from LEC who are Europeans would be on the LCS if you come at the right time. Like, this could have been the best broadcast in the history of esports. For real.
Mean, D-Man tried to do LCS later on, and they said no.
Yep.
Like, he went through like 8 interviews and they decided to deny him, an LCS slot.
But you notice this is a metaphor for all of League, dude, because what Riot does is this. Riot does things in the most fucking like slapdash, lazy, ill thought out, stupid way. And at the end of all of that, they then turn and throw a number at you and go, the number's only 1 now, so that proves that the broadcast can't work anymore. And it's like, but you made all the variables that made it fail. No, the broadcast just can't fail, so shut it down. It's the same as basically what they did with Best of 3 in Europe, where they ran it in such a stupid fashion. Does everyone remember a detail about this? When they ran like Best of 2 and all that shit, they also, by the way, they forget to mention this. They don't mention that they also separated the league into like the NBA with an Eastern and Western Conference. You don't remember that, Monty? No one remembers that detail right there. They then act like when the viewership went down, that's because Best of 2s are bad. They don't acknowledge a different factor. The whole thing's nonsense, mate. The worst thing about Riot, if people don't know our content, has always been the take, is they paint themselves into a corner and then explain that because of all this paint trapping them in a corner, there's nothing they can do. And never acknowledge they were the ones that painted themselves in the corner. And we the whole time are going, I wouldn't paint yourself in that corner. It's not going to work. And then they just go, well, it's too late now, isn't it?
Look at all this paint.
There we go. That's all good.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. A lot of these decisions remain questionable.
Mate, why do people watch this show? I don't get it. Like, why don't people just watch your stream, Monty? They don't want to hear me talk, even though it's my show. I invented, have hosted, booked 90% of the guests for, have brought all the fucking entertainment. Every time it's a boring episode, I bring up a bunch of funny things. Why am I here? What's the point? If it's just to listen to you talk, I'll go, mate. You can stay on your own. What's the point?
No,
that's not a shot at you, by the way. I just think that we have the stupidest fans. What I'm so sick of is this, Monty. Every person who I do shows with now does their own show. So if you watch my show, you have to admit you're watching it for me. Monty does, you know what, he talks about the same topics with like 2 different sets of people on other shows that don't feature me. So if you tune into this show and complain that I talk, you are objectively a fucking cretin. You probably work for Riot Games. There you go. It's all good now. I've got out of my system.
No, it's true. And also, like, this show is the most popular show on LFN. That's full stop.
Oh, it's weird now. No, wait a second, Doc. That doesn't make sense, Monty. You're telling me the show with the British guy no one wants to hear on, that doesn't even have guests on it anymore, is more popular than a show featuring I Will Dominate, one of the biggest streamers in the whole world. Well, what do you know? The numbers don't lie, homie. Fucking hell. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I know.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's all right. So yeah. Anyway, it's definitely been a very interesting week around the meta of League of Legends with some of these announcements that are coming out, and especially as like the ongoing esports crisis unfolds and has unfolded across, you know, several of our shows at this point in time. Four Horsemen, again, go back and watch that if you haven't. And just had to talk about this because of the post that was made. Have any other topics you want to discuss? I mean, the thing is like, as I said before, you and I have already discussed all of the matches that have happened on other shows, whether it was Best Damn League Show or Power Spike this week. But we can dive into that. Any interesting takes you have on LPL finals or the way LEC is unfolding?
Yeah, let's do a little bit of all of it. So on the LPL, I would actually say this was just, sadly, here's the problem. Even though BLG did play really well, like it's one of those examples, a bit like BDS in Europe. I can't hate on the team that won the games. They did deserve to win the games. Sadly, the playoffs for LPL were just a little bit underwhelming for me because BLG wasn't one of my big teams. I wanted to see all those matchups I was bragging you about all those last time. I wanted to see JDG against like fucking LNG and then like Weibo and then maybe TES. And spoiler, none of those matches happened because of BLG and also fucking OMG, sadly. So in the end, the good news for me is this, right? BLG, like BDS, do deserve to be at MSI. That's cool. But also, I need like a really good team. So same as in Europe, it's going to be like G2 or Vitality. At least I got JDG out of China. At least I got them because that was a team that from the second you saw the roster, you were like, this could be really exciting. You saw the initial games. Yeah, they have the odd game that they throw super hard. When they hit, this team is so fucking powerful in League of Legends. Like this was a team where when I even saw the roster, I was like, dude, if they play this right, this is a world champion right here. So that still looks to be the case with JDG. As you see, when their game is on, they are amazing. And I can tell you what, mate, after all those years of seeing Jackie Love fucking int Knight, oh, it's a blessing to have Ruler. Do you know what it feels like to have Ruler instead of Jackie? Because if people don't know, even though he's become a bit more aggressive in the last few years when they play around him, Ruler is probably the best example of the safe ADC that doesn't throw the game. He's the opposite of Jackie Love, but he's just as fucking good or better at the game. So this is why, like, if they keep this combo together, mate, Knight and Ruler, mate, they are going to run the fucking LPL for years to come. That combo is fucking fire, mate. It's fire.
Especially because they've been able to skirmish so successfully in like the 3v3s and the bot river and around the dragon and stuff like that, with missing as well, or with Kanavi being there. And that's how they get a lot of their advantages. I will say, like, if you guys have been watching JDG throughout the season, first off, this was a very dominant series by JDG. Like, yes, they lost game 3. There were some questionable choices, such as they had been playing the Cassante, Bin locks in the Gwen, and then they counterpick themselves with Cassante, because we've seen the Gwen be a counterpick. So, I mean, I think they were kind of fucking around in game number 3, if I'm being honest. And then they came back and just, clapped BLG in the last game of the series. I guess it was a little closer, but honestly,
I also do love the way in League, that is like a really famous trend. Have you noticed that the second that you get amazing and you think you're the best team in the world, you have to instantly do some shit like a British villain would in an old 80s movie, where it's like, I will just pointlessly give you a head start now, you fucking you could never defeat me. It's like, why not just win 3-0? But they can never do it. Yeah. It's like Samsung White back in the day. True. They couldn't just 3-0 TSM. They had to actually try and prove like TSM can't even play League of Legends, that's so silly, isn't it? I do sort of love it though. I low-key love it in a way.
So I for those of you who didn't watch the season, JDG wasn't, they were extremely good when they were good. They played very well from ahead. They have had some issues, like Kanavi has kind of inted some games, so there's still like that question mark a little bit, although it didn't show up in the finals. I thought Kanavi
I'll tell you what the interesting angle on that one is, Monty. This is something people will miss, because this is connected to why BLG made it this far. If people don't know, sadly, because of JDG, individually, Yagao was actually always overrated. He's just, because you have to understand, he was never actually in the elite circle of mids. The elite circle of mids was Rookie, Knight, fucking Zhao, Scout. Like, you have to understand, it's so stacked in China. We're not even hating on him by saying he wasn't in that group. His whole style, if people don't know, was he was like, if you remember the old style when he was in Cloud9 of Niski, of like he helps the jungler, that's what Yagao does with Kanavi. And so what he's done successfully in his career is he works really well with the team. He's like a mega good mid for that. So that's one reason why I also think Kanavi had some dodgy games this split, Monty, is because he didn't have Yagao, which is equivalent to like when suddenly you take out the Niski equation and you just put in a really good mid laner, but they're just a selfish mid laner. You're not going to have the same connection. You're not going to have the same person guiding you. You're not going to have the same interactions. So I even wonder if that's part of the equation, because I also agree. Like, I thought Kanavi would be even better, but actually, if anything, he's a little bit weaker in this team, I feel.
Yeah, he's made some really weird individual decisions at times, like on invades and dying in kind of strange ways. I think it's gotten better, and we saw less of that during the playoffs, and certainly a lot less of it during the finals. But I'm talking about potential weaknesses here at MSI. Obviously, this is an extremely good team and probably should be considered like a co-favorite going into MSI alongside Gen G. The positives have been immense, right? Outside of some, like the Weibo series very early on in the LPL, where Ruler just completely griefed that series. Ruler has been amazing. Ruler was incredible in this series. 369 has been insanely stable as a player. And what I love about 369 is that, he kind of neutralizes the top lane. Like, we saw him taking the Cassante into the Jax in the first 2 games and performing very well. He can shut down carries. When we saw him in the final game of this series, his Gragas he's the best top lane Gragas in the world. I don't even think that's a question. And the way that he roamed onto the map, TP'd into the bottom side, got Ruler ahead, his map awareness is excellent. His flanking is excellent. His engaging is excellent. His tanking is excellent. Like, he is such a good player. And even when the enemy top laner is a world-class top laner, he is able to neutralize a lot of their carry potential and basically delete them from the game while providing a lot of support to the carries, Knight and Ruler on his team. He's just playing great. I mean, this has been a really amazing season for 369.
Another thing I'll give mad props to is whoever actually did build this roster. Because another thing about this team was, think about JDG that we saw at Worlds last year, where they were like a dark horse to maybe win the whole thing. This is like a better version. This is an even better, like, they actually recruited players, Monty, who are also amazing at team fighting. It was actually such a well put together squad. Because as you say, think about it, when you get, these are already strong laners who then become super strong team fighters and are some of the best in the world at their position. Like, it's just a fucking amazing squad. It's one of the rare times where super teams do work. Like, this just works, mate.
Yeah, they may have some issues, like when they fall behind early, in the same way that potentially like T1 had some of those issues. Like, if they weren't getting big advantages, they could sometimes struggle. I'm curious to see what happens in like the 13.8 meta with all of the teams. Knight basically ran through playoffs where most of his success was on pick champions like Ahri, Annie, or Syndra. Like, all of his wins in playoffs came on those champions. And of course, he's very well known and very good at all those champions. I thought his Annie in the finals was not as good as I've seen it in the past. He missed some stuns. He wasn't keeping track of summoners, so he would sometimes like try and flash stun people who had flash up, and it was a little awkward. But his Ari was excellent, and I know his Annie has been really good. And he draws tons of Syndra bans, as people
Oh,
know.
Syndra's unbelievable, mate.
Yeah, yeah. So that's been a big, strong point for him. But basically, they were creating scenarios where he could roam and get ruler ahead, or they could fight in these skirmishes and start to get a pick and then operate, start getting jinx resets for ruler to clean up these team fights. Worked really well for them. I like what we were seeing.
By the
JDG
way,
continues to be able to
you,
run with leads like almost no team in the world.
You know how we always pointed out, specifically Rookie was the best example of this, like that the elite Asian Oriana is so different from the Western Oriana, because the Western Oriana is either you're just a mage player or you pick it to be safe and sort of like, whatever, can't get too out of control. In the same way as Rookie's Oriana was on another level. If you've only seen Western players play Syndra, you have no idea what that champion is. You have to go and watch Night Now play, because dude, when he plays it, you don't even notice it's not mobile, mate. And it's never a problem. Like, he's just always in the right place. He just kills you instantly. You just execute. He's so fucking good when he's on his best champions, mate.
Yeah, it's fun, especially because it's been a pocket ban, and they actually Billy had to like pick it away from him when they didn't want to ban it in the final game of the series, because they started, banning the Annie instead. I still think some of the LPL meta was a little weird. There was like less priority on Annie for a lot of teams, except for like JDG. And there's still obviously like the pocket ban meta, like we see the Kindred against Billy or the Rumble against OMG.
If you notice, they always have like extra jungle picks in China. If you notice that, they always have like champions that are like really hard to like make work or like mega aggressive. Like, for example, they're the region that just always has Nidalee. Just all permanently at jungle, like what? Like that. If people don't know, spoiler, like you can go look up some of the games where people try. That's like probably one of the hardest champions to ever fucking make work. They just do it all the time.
In context, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that really helped JDG was like Kanavi basically only played Wukong, which is extremely strong right now. And in Korea, that started, really rising up the pick ban priority status. And like, especially in the last couple of series, like it was just basically like Wukong for Kanavi. So I think it was a smart priority for them and worked out really well. So JDG, I think, was more similar to kind of the Korean style of drafting on this patch that we saw from T1 and Gen G and KT and those teams. With the exception of obviously the Syndra, that was something, but that's unique to Knight, as you said previously. So yeah, it was not the most spectacular LPL playoffs, let's put it that way, but I still think it's exciting to see the teams that are going. I don't think Billy is better than T1 or Gen G. Yagao had quite a bad performance in the finals, I thought, compared to the rest of his playoff run, where he looked like he was in the kind of form heading into Worlds that he was last year. But by the time it got to the finals, he looked like how he looked at Worlds last year, which was not great. And also, I think it has to be said that, in the semifinals, they faced EDG, and Fofo has been one of the big weak links there, so it wasn't the hardest mid matchup for him.
Yes. It's actually sad though, because basically, like I say, Billy weren't even on the radar for all these great discussions all split along. It was all the other teams. It was top esports, and it was because that was, if people don't know, even though now that's aged very badly, the joke is just be careful what you wish for, Rookie. Yeah, I used to think like Knight has a better team than you. Like, yeah, maybe not, because like that team also looked like it could be very interesting on paper, just didn't work out sadly. The Weibo one similar, could have been fire, kind of ended up lackluster. Unfortunately, a lot of the teams, like this is why the MSI one actually hasn't ended up as sick as it's, because we didn't get the dream people from every region. We got it from Korea. We might get it from LEC. We didn't get it from LCS, and we didn't get it from LPL. So it's like, it's going to be good, but it could have been even more stacked. Could have been even more stacked.
Yeah, and LEC, I think there's been a lot of talk of the format recently, because weirdly the championship points are the same for winter and spring, because they don't increase the championship points from winter to the spring split. It's just winter and spring are the same, and then they increase them for summer split. So we're now in this situation where if G2 wins the finals, which even though they're starting in the in the lower bracket, they're still G2 and could absolutely turn it on at any point in time and win this entire thing. That means that Mad Lions will automatically qualify to MSI, even if they place fourth.
This is something I wanted to
split.
ask you about, because this is an example, in my opinion, of an obvious flaw in the format. Because it presents a scenario, Monty, which, in my opinion, should never even be a consideration, which is the match that Mad Lions is now scheduled to play against G2, Monty. You could argue they would actually be better intentionally losing the game because of what you just said.
Dom made that argument.
That should never exist. That is such, anytime I can lose the game and it might help me in the long run, that is a nightmare, because first of all, it just opens up betting scenarios, but then also in this case, as we say, like I actually remember, for financial reasons, I'm incentivized to want to be at MSI. It's massive for my org. Like, it's a big deal. So, like, I hate that. Just makes me very uncomfortable when that scenario exists. Now, look, luckily, pro players are just kids playing games. They will go in the game. They will try and win it. They'll try and win the league. They probably even believe they can win the league. But sorry, I just get uncomfortable whenever potential corruption like that is available. You know, it just makes me a bit uncomfortable. I have another one I wanted to run by you. So, do you have a take on that?
I mean, I think it's bad. There's several ways I think you could solve this issue. So one of the reasons why Mad Lion, we're in this situation is Odo Omne suggested on Twitter that
I was going to bring this up. Yeah.
The losers, basically the losers of each group. So the second place teams from each group, they cross over and play each other, which, by the way, is exactly what happens at the MSI format. So if you're not familiar with the way play-ins are going to work at MSI, it's that they have the two GSL groups, the number one teams automatically qualify to the bracket, and then they play a third place match between the losers of both of those finals in the groups. So they could do the exact same thing here, potentially, to try and figure out, or like even in the first place matches, just cross the groups, right? Because in this particular instance, it did seem like Group B, the one that contained BDS, SK, G2, and Koi, was a lot stronger than Group A that contained Astralis, Fnatic, Vitality, and Mad Lions. And the argument could be made that in a qualification match, so this would be the lower bracket finals in this particular format, so where Astralis played Mad and Koi played G2, if we had instead seen the teams cross groups and play each other, that we may have ended up with Koi and G2 in the playoffs instead of either Astralis or Mad Lions, and then we wouldn't have this problem. So there's two ways to handle it. That's a good way. I agree with that. I think Odo Omne's take is right.
That's a great suggestion. Rare players come up with stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. And also, again, this is another weird thing. Riot themselves has somewhat, it's not exactly the same with MSI, but it is very, it's the same concept, basically. It's just being applied slightly differently. In that it, instead of like playing, instead of it being like the third place team or whatever. Anyway, you get it. So yeah. It is a little bit interesting. And the other thing is just to increase the championship points for spring. It's just to increase the championship points for spring so that you don't have a situation where Mad Lions could get second place and fourth place and qualify if G2 wins twice. If there were more points and BDS was already in the finals, then maybe they could, do a little bit better if Mad Lions gets eliminated in fourth point wise.
By the way, am I the only one who finds
necessary?
I find this so confusing, Monty, because it brings up the original season 3 stupid championship point problem that meant Naj and Blacksword went to Worlds instead of KT Rolster. This is the original problem from the first year of the fucking LCS, and you haven't figured it out in LEC in 2023. Because what annoys me about this is the way that the point system was designed. Here's as someone who has designed formats, here's my takeaway, Monty. I think whoever did the points was only thinking about the whole circuit and the Worlds part. I don't think they thought about, but MSI also is essentially a different, and I think that's the mistake they made, because I get why if you think about it, if you're thinking summer's more important, I get why spring and winter would seem the same. But in this scenario, MSI is Worlds, and you've just made spring and summer the same as it was. You've run into the same problem we've all seen a million times. Actually, on Best Damn League Show, which you can watch the VOD of on this channel, or if you're technically on Twitch as well, but watch it on YouTube, please. And basically, we actually also discussed there an idea that Dom had. Maybe he brought it up on your show, I'm not sure, but I thought it was a great one too, which was, how about this? Here's what you do, Monty. Whoever wins the spring split gets the first MSI spot. then whoever is second and third in points just plays a best of five to decide who goes. Because here's the point I tried to make. The most frustrating thing about League has been in LEC. You remember a couple of years ago, Rogue barely won any fucking games and qualified automatically almost, right? Then you had Mad Lions did it last year. No playoff series won, qualified to Worlds. If Mad Lions ends up being the second or third seed in points, Monty, but they beat like Vitality in a best of five, who's going to complain? Exactly. At that point, I'd even say, hey, I'm actually hyped to see Mad Lions there. But if they go just by losing to G2 now, no one's going to be hyped. No one's going to be hyped because they beat Astralis and Fnatic, are they? You know what I mean? I think that's not only have I tried to make the format better, but if you notice, I'm trying to give like a satisfying reason that someone qualifies.
Yeah, it'd be great. No, I think it's a really good idea. But here's the problem, Thorin. They've run out of days because I don't know if you saw Yamato Cannon. Yep. We're talking about a lot of other people's videos today. So you can go to Yamato Cannon's channel and he talks about the problems with MSI and LEC. They took a break week. We still don't know why. Like, why did they have a break week between the spring groups? Oh, it was the spring round robin and the spring groups between the first phase and second phase of LEC, because it is cutting it so close to the start of MSI. Guys, it's 4:20 today. MSI starts in 2 weeks. It starts in 2 weeks. LEC isn't done yet. And yeah, the tournament is in Europe, so it's not, the same burden of travel time or anything like that. But how can you possibly be prepared? Because you are skipping, 3 patches? They're on 13.5. No, they're on 13.6. They're skipping 2 patches. The other playoffs were on 13.5. But those tournaments are done. So let's say, you are playing this weekend to determine all the finals. That means that you don't finish playing games. The MSI teams are not going to finish playing games until Monday the 24th. That gives them a week to practice on the new patch. They cannot scrim on the new patch right now, whereas all the other teams in the world are capable of scrimming on the MSI patch right now. And so they're going to be significantly less prepared. They're going to have travel days. Like, let's say they travel to London on the 25th. Well, there's not going to be scrimming that day. Maybe there won't be scrimming on the 26th. Also, remember, guys, that the way these tournament works, they have to have media days. So what's going to happen when they get there is they're going to have an entire day where they're going to do photo shoots and video shoots and interviews. Not going to be able to practice then either. So you really have cut in massively to the European team's ability to adapt to the patch of MSI by giving them a lot less time. It's been a couple weeks since some of these other leagues have finished, and the patch wasn't out yet, but it is now, for them to adapt to this patch. And it's going to really hurt LEC teams' performance. So why did they take an extra week? Why do they take this time off? I don't understand why they take these breaks, which pushes LEC so late.
I mean, I just think that, like, if you look at when, like, LCS and LCK ended, it is unacceptable to give that kind of a disadvantage to LEC. There's no good reason
also
for it.
They're also the home team. Like, it's in Europe. Like, we should want to help the European teams do as well as possible in front of the home crowd. And instead, we're in a scenario where they will be significantly less prepared, particularly than the Asian teams who are just going to be sitting there scrimming on this patch the entire time. So the scheduling, again, I think is relatively suspect in this instance, and you see the problems. But back to the point we were making, Thorin, if you play that extra best of 5, well, all of a sudden, if we played the number 2 in championship points versus the number 3 in championship points, then what you have is that would happen on the 25th, and then you lose another day before MSI. So because of the week break, that's not even an option. Like, you have to schedule this in a way that makes sense.
Luckily, though, I will say, all the shit we've had to put up with, Riot and things here, and then flaws, and then we're learning about the format, it's all going to be worth it when MSI comes, though, because I am so hyped for that tournament.
Yeah, actually, the MSI format does
for real. People don't get it because you can tell they just haven't watched enough double elim tournaments, mate. This is the most hyped I've ever been for any tournament in League of Legends ever.
Yes, agreed.
Because Worlds was just always so underwhelming as a format, wasn't it? Like, so this is going to be amazing. I think it's going to be sick.
Yeah, we're going to get some really, really fucking good games. And yeah, it's pretty disappointing that Golden Guardians is going, and it may be very disappointing that Mad Lions goes. But hopefully, Vitality or BDS will win this split of LEC. We will dodge the bullet. They can fix the format in a way that makes sense for next year. We're not going to have the scenario again in summer, most likely. So yeah, I'm still encouraged by. I think the LEC format is still good overall. It just requires some minor tweaks to avoid these scenarios, as well as some fixes to the scheduling. And hopefully they've learned a few lessons about some of these outliers and how to avoid them in the future. But MSI's format appears to be, I would say, almost flawless. Like I can't really see a lot of problems with how it's being enacted right now. Should provide us very interesting play-ins, should provide us very interesting, the double bracket. We should see some really compelling best of fives between a lot of the best teams in the world. And hopefully we'll get some more, all Western best of fives in the lower bracket, which are exciting in their own right. Like, I think that's the problem, is that in the single limb format, we often just saw the Western teams get bopped and then didn't ever see them play each other. And so we couldn't actually develop hype for them at international competition.
Imagine how hype C9 against G2 will be if it happens.
I mean, just think about at last year's Worlds, EG versus Mad Lions was a very hyped up match, right? And it wasn't the best match. It wasn't like the most compelling match on paper in terms of gameplay, but the fact that it actually happened and we got to see those teams play against each other really activated the Western fan base. And I think part of the reason that LCS has declined in popularity is that LCS teams can, as we've seen, take on European teams. Will they win the majority of those? No, but they have a much better shot than against the Asian teams. And so if you provide opportunities for NA teams to occasionally win those games, like we saw in EG versus Mad Lions, then maybe the American fan base won't be quite so despondent about their team's performance and will activate more fan base for the LCS, right? That seems like the best way to do it for me, because we can't be realistic about these teams winning worlds or winning international competitions. So do it this way, which again, then obviously you have to raise the question, why not do it at worlds as well? It doesn't make sense. But hopefully after this year, the MSI format will dominate and we will see a change to worlds next year. That is my hope.
I'll also throw this in there. Another unexpected consequence that people haven't thought through is because now an extra team from Europe and NA gets international experience, and literally within the same season, that also is a big deal. Like that can level a team up. Like what I imagine is this: the dream is, say someone goes who's a rookie, you can flunk at MSI, but still be good at Worlds. Like before, you had to be the champion or even go to MSI. Like this also just opens the scene up to be, because as you're saying, the real way, we won't do the whole thing because I've done it a million times, but the real way that you make the West more competitive with the East, you don't change anything about the game. You just make them play more. The more familiar they are, the less it's like a big pressure thing. It doesn't make you better at the game. Like spoiler, in CSGO, most of the NA teams still lose to all the European teams. But I tell you what, they're way closer when they play. Like if people know the team complexity in CSGO, dude, all the time they're mixing it up with top European teams going like this close to beating them in the third map. If they only played them once a year and in a massive high pressure game, they'd almost never do that, guys. Like it would be a different game. Yeah, it'd be a totally different game.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited about MSI. I am also, they announced today, Thor, and you'll love this, Yuumi is disabled for the entirety of MSI because they've said that the rework didn't really hit they're still concerned about her basically at the professional level, which is amazing because I really didn't want to see more fucking Yuumi at the professional level. And they're also disabling Milio, the new support champion, which I guess we haven't seen it in pro play yet. I don't think it's like OP or anything like that. Probably would have been kind of interesting, but I think they didn't want to introduce new champions to MSI when we hadn't seen it in regional competition. So I respect that. I respect that. We don't need to see Milio. We certainly don't need to see Yuumi. And they definitely missed the mark with the Yuumi changes that they made. And I'm not sure how they could ever really fix this champion without it being completely useless in casual play, like on the ranked ladder. But there's also the opportunity of just banning Yuumi forever from professional play, which I personally don't have a problem with at all. I think that's the best solution going forward.
I personally don't think the champion adds very much to the game. Like, here's the difference. Because I talk to all the different people in the different roles, look, I can get you people who are very intelligent, who'll make a case as to why like Aphelios shouldn't be removed and it has like value and it can do all this. I've never met a single pro player ever who had an argument for why Yuumi's good for the game. I've never met one ever. Even support players who play it don't like it. Guys, that is the ultimate sign right there. Same thing's happening in CSGO. Sometimes there's an OP gun in CSGO, and the people who use it will be like, yeah, I think it's broken, it should be fixed. Like, what more do you need at that point, guys? Like, they're benefiting from it. By the way, one thing I thought I could just throw out there is, I'm just going to say it now. I've already talked about Best Damn League show, but like essentially, if you know me, I'm not just going to bail on Vitality because they got beaten 3-0 by BDS. Because think about what that implies. That implies you think that is their normal level and is how they will play in all future series. I think that was probably the worst Vitality has ever looked, far and away. There were players who played inexplicably bad, like Bo, in a way that just doesn't even make sense. Look, Perks wasn't great, but he doesn't really have to be great in this team anyway. I just don't think that'll happen again. Like, look, I don't know if they're going to beat G2 because almost certainly they're going to play G2 next. That's going to be a banger series. For me, that would have been the original final. But I think they can beat them. I still think it's possible Vitality can win the league. I'm not just going to duck out. Like, I think there's a world where they turn up way better than they were in that game.
Right. I think you can argue that very easily that Vitality had the weaker group and so may have looked better, but also it just felt like on this particular day that Vitality, like basically Photon, Bo, Perks, and Kaiser all underperformed at the same time. At the same time. And that hasn't been true.
And Upset just couldn't play League of Legends as a result.
Yeah, and Upset couldn't play League
No
of
one
Legends
knows how he played. He never played League. Exactly.
I think Upset was fine. But I don't think they're all going to have a bad day again. Now, it's been true of Vitality that they've all those guys have kind of been taking turns having bad days, but it hasn't happened simultaneously. And the other question you have to ask is, what happens when they all have a good day simultaneously?
And I'm just going to throw this out there. Same logic. Are we all going to pretend this isn't the only day ever in the history of League of Legends that Labrov put together 2 games in a row like this? Are we not pretending this is Labrov's normal level? Is it fuck? I've watched him all these years. Spoiler, he used to be on Vitality if people don't know. Like, I've seen Labrov, mate. Look, props to him for having a really big game in, like, look, it wasn't like, oh no, it was playoffs. Yeah, in a playoff match. Big props. But I have to see it again, mate. Like, I don't know. Are you really going to get those champions? Are you really going to land every hook again? If he can do it, fair play. But I thought he actually overperformed that series. Like, Crownie was mega. In general, I give it up to Nook and Shield. They play pretty well in all the games. But I actually thought it, like, first of all, Adam inexplicably was gapping Photon. And then Bo was shit. He wasn't even in the game. And then, I'm with you. Like, the actual Labrov one, though, like, mate, no one expected that overperform. Look, everyone knows Kaiser's the weak spot on Vitality, but he wasn't supposed to be, like, way worse than Labrov. So I think people they're seeing the worst of Vitality, the absolute best of BDS, and they're just doing that thing every fan does. Like, it was always going to be like that. What, you thought the other team could win, you moron? I'll just say I'll double down on Vitality. So let's see how it works out.
It also was that they had a lead in game 2 of this series and were doing quite well. And then when they weren't playing individually, they were so they had the individual ability problem that we discussed. So individually, a lot of their players were doing worse. 4 out of their 5 players, I think, were playing below their average level. And then also when they had a lead, they would force the strangest fights. Like, why the fuck would you play against BDS, play into like Wukong, Aphelios, Cassiopeia, and then pile into a choke point where you get absolutely obliterated by their AoE? Vitality just wasn't even playing their composition properly. Like, they were basically playing a pick comp with like Nautilus, Annie, Lee Sin, and Xayah. And they opted into fights that were extremely unfavorable to them. So I don't really get, they seem to have lost the plot when it comes to their team communication and win conditions, because these games were winnable in spite of the fact that they had a bad day. Like, game 2 and game 3 were winnable games for Vitality that they basically threw.
And also, let's just throw this in there. What the fuck was that action draft in game 1? What? Why? Well, mate, that's why it's a dom. I speculated. That makes me think that these teams were scrimming because they were in different groups, and that Vitality actually thought they were the underdog. Like, why do you start game 1 with that fucking draft, mate? You know what I mean?
I think the answer is because they know, like, if they see the Darius, like, the action is a good matchup with the Darius, and because they know they're not going to be running teleport, they think they can kind of like win the 1v1, make Darius useless. But what's special about the way that Adam and BDS play around Adam is they pick these lane bully champions, or things that Adam can really do well on in the laning phase and get these leads. Now, obviously, the problem is, but Darius is very kiteable into the mid and late game stages of team fights. But you know what? Here's how you can close the gap. You have a Maokai. So he just ults or W somebody, and Darius ghosts, and then all of a sudden he can start dealing damage. They have a Thresh that can hook somebody and make sure Darius does damage. They build compositions around him. And here's the other thing that they do. There was a lot of talk on the broadcast. Oh, BDS has gotten, every dragon for the last 20 days or whatever it was. Well, the reason why they're able to do that is because in the early stages of the game, Adam is winning the 1v1s on some of these champions. And so the enemy jungler basically has to go topside. And so BDS is able to just take dragons more or less for free on the bottom side of the map because Adam is exerting a lot of pressure. And the secret about Adam statistically is that he is actually a very low economy top laner. Because in the late stages of the game, they don't give him farm. He is basically just a distraction in the early stages of the game while Crowny ramps up like a motherfucker.
He's like the really old school tops. You remember back in season 2 and 3 where they were on the island and the whole point was that they just played 1v1. That's all the game was. Yeah.
I mean, he's basically just, he's a matador with the red flag that's distracting the bull from attacking the matador instead. And it works. But
you know what's genius about that as well is I'm just going to say it. Adam's the same as Malrang Monty. If you put him in the worst team, I've seen him when he's in the worst team, he would do all this anyway. That's why I know it's the coaching staff doing it, Monty, because they've even managed essentially to make weaknesses become part of the dynamic. Because think about this, Monty. What's the most alluring thing to make the jungler want to go top and gank is when the top laner is pushed in too far and he won't let the wave come back. That's Adam's whole game. Essentially, he's the greatest bait of all. He is a laser pointer and the jungler is a cat. Like you can't help, you have to go for him. Well, but this can work in your favor because, as you say, if you're ganking up there, we're taking the dragon or we're having a fight.
So I understand the theory behind why the action pick is selected here, okay? But at the same time,
it's like you say though, Monty, it's only as a theory craft it works though. Because one, I'm just going to say it right now, Adam is the same as fucking leader. You think that is a counter because that is a counter to a normal player. He lives in the counters. He has, literally, people like Leader and Adam are playing those counters all day long. So the joke is, not only are you not as good on the counter pick, but they're way too good on the pick you're countering. Yeah, exactly. That's the part where, like, this is why it does kill me, Monty, because it's a bit like what me and Dom always said about the Misfits team last year. It's like, look, props to you for finding a formula, but I would just be a dick in the playoffs and just cynically, I would take the anchor, the bottleneck, in this case it's Adam, and I would just ban all your shit out. And here's the thing, if you want to play Gnar and you want to play Silent, have at it. That is you can do what you want, mate, but I'm not letting you ever play Darius, all the shit that you are just too uniquely good on.
And look at the difference between game 2 when Adam was on the Scion. And it's not that Adam is necessarily bad at Scion, but they were doing a lot better when they were forcing BDS to group early or Adam to play in some of these team fights. And that's the game where Vitality did have a lead and should have been able to close out that game, but they took some really stupid fights that didn't suit their team composition and basically played right into BDS's hands and then gave BDS a Baron and they won the game. So, I think Vitality came in. Look, like you're saying, there's no way, even if it is a counter pick matchup, like I think playing fleet footwork, flash ghost action does make it very difficult for Darius to play. Now, if there's a gank that comes in from the Maokai, action can be in trouble for sure. Like that is he could die really fast if he's locked down. So if you chain the CC on him, then it's possible. But I think in an isolated 1v1, if you play safely, you can kind of get through the laning phase, and then Darius isn't going to be as good in a lot of those team fights. But again, that's under normal conditions. It's not under the conditions where Adam plays against these ranged matchups all day long and can do very well. It's not, it's about BDS's style where they know how to play around the Darius because that's what they practice with all day. So if they know better than you how to prop him up in those situations, and they also draft in a way that you wouldn't see in solo queue, where again, they're running Thresh, Orianna, and Maokai. They can provide enough crowd control and enough engage to allow Darius to close the gap in team fights. And that's not always true of Darius comps in solo queue. So it is, they really do a great job of their coaching staff preparing for this and playing around it. And they still have win conditions because if you spend all day camping the Darius, they don't care. They dragon stack. Crowny gets a massive lead, and then he just explodes you with a million chakrams on Aphelios in a team fight. So their style is good.
I also appreciate that, by the way. They play really well around crown shot too. Like they actually get which way their fucking bread is buttered, mate. But let's be real. Right now, if we were to vote right now, Crowley's probably the MVP of the fucking LEC, mate. Why wouldn't he be?
Yeah,
it'd probably be my vote.
Yeah, I think like a lot of this this BDS roster is the coaches really understanding the players' strengths and building a style that is very effective for them, and the players buying into that style. I think Adam is individually a better player than he was on Fnatic, and he's less of a liability. But it's also the fact that his team is just playing really well around him, and they're drafting really well around him. So there's a lot of reasons why BDS is doing well, and they also just have a very solid fundamental sense of macro that has done them enormous favors. So we're seeing that, bear fruit. I don't think that this team will do particularly well against Asian teams because they're basically just a worse version of like Gen G, for example. And also, a lot of their success is predicated on surprise from Adam's champion pool. But who's not going to be surprised by Adam's champion pool? The LPL teams who play against these champions all the time. Like, they're not strangers to fucking Olaf or Darius or weird ass carry picks in the top lane. They're going to be very good at dismantling BDS if they go to MSI.
Do we do some viewer questions?
Yeah, let's take
Let's
a quick
do a quick
break.
break. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do a quick break and we'll come back with viewer questions for you guys.
Right, we're going to do some viewer questions now. If people don't know, you can ask these questions by being a subscriber to our Discord, the Last Free Nation Discord. If you go there, it's just basically the best revenue split of all the different ways you can be a member of something. So we replaced the Grog coin with that. And if you are someone who subscribes there, there's a channel where you can put the questions in there, and that's where Monty draws them from now.
That's right. So let's start. Have you thought of doing something like a monthly book/movie club to try and educate the nephews about literature and art? I mean, that's part of the content we want to do with LFN in the future. We've talked about Thorin and I doing like a graphic novel book club, where we go through classic graphic novels and discuss them. Doe and I want to do like a nerd culture podcast, which would be about whatever, new show came out with his House of the Dragon
Wars,
or
all that crap, yeah.
the Mandalorian Andor, Rings of Power, whatever, where we discuss
or
that.
What Brian Sanderson book he's reading or some growth, I'm guessing.
I'm not reading those books, but it'd be like TV and movies, I think, where I get super angry probably and rant about how bad it is, and then Doa tries to be a fanboy. Look, it's the same shit that you loved about us, like talking on the old OGN broadcasts, etc. I mean, I think honestly, like if you, Richard, and I did a show talking about, classic sci-fi movies or like classic movies, that would be very entertaining. People love to hear about that. I would certainly.
People don't know, Richard is essentially like almost a specialist here on like 80s horror and stuff like that, for example.
Oh,
so
yeah,
like,
I'd love to do that.
He could go
really
super
fun.
niche. Yeah, he knows all like the cult classics he can recommend.
Yeah, so like we could do something like that. I think having me, Thorin, and Richard do that would be really fun. I'd definitely be down for that. So these are all kind of ideas that we want to do that. What changes the game more? Overwatch 2, CS2, or random bi-weekly patches in League of Legends? Well, Overwatch 2 didn't change the game very much, so not that one. I guess the question is like, does a patch in League of Legends change the game more than CSGO to CS2? I'm not sure we're going to know that yet, but the smoke change is pretty huge to CS2.
What was the first part of the question?
What changes the game more? Because it obviously depends on the patch in League of Legends. I would argue that most of the season-ending patches in League of Legends are probably bigger than the changes that I've seen from CS to CS2. Like, even though the smoke change is absolutely huge, and in my rather uneducated Counter-Strike opinion, not being a deep analyst of that game, but being a fan of it, I think the new smokes look super cool. I think it's really interesting the way you can interact with it. It appears to me that it'll be more interesting tactically. What's your take on it?
I don't think it'll be that big a difference. Like, there's even downsides potentially to the way the smokes work. The problem with things like smokes or weapons is Counter-Strike especially is a game about abusing every possible exploitable aspect. So if a gun like the Krieg's too powerful, everyone just uses it. If smokes work in a certain way, everyone will be... So the problem is you can't ever really know until the pros apply it if it's better or worse. Right. I will say, I think in general, League, even just individual patches are way bigger. Like, if anything, the thing I think actually comforts a lot of people about CS2 is it doesn't feel like it's going to be radically different. It's basically CSGO with a different graphics, which is what everyone wants because
I mean, the graphics look fucking amazing.
Like, let's be real. Nobody in 2015 ever said, like, oh, I'm not going to keep playing CSGO if it's the same. It's the opposite. We don't want it changed. So I actually think that's the best selling point, is that it's somewhat more like, it's more akin to the Overwatch 2 change than it is to like a brand new game.
Right. And that's why we continue to see player growth in Counter-Strike. Again, you know, Counter-Strike hit a new level of peak concurrent players just recently. And as soon as the new game drops, we'll probably see a level of concurrent players that were never, ever equaled in CSGO. Like, I imagine the first week of CS2 is going to see a level of play in Counter-Strike that we have never seen before in the game. And a lot of that is because it stays the same. You can walk away from Counter-Strike for literally years and come back and play the same map with basically the same map, maybe some minor changes, with the same, virtually the same economy and the same weapons. You can't do it. If you're out in 3 years in League of Legends, I will just tell you, from being in Overwatch League, it's fucking hard to come back, man. Like, I had to work hard to get, my analysis skills back up to speed and learn all the changes within the game. Like, it's tough. If tomorrow you could separate the LoL pro scene from casual gaming, what would you include in your first patch notes? Well, disabling Yuumi until the end of time. That would probably be a good start. I would, I never cared about the casual scene, the professional scene being very different. So I would undo all of the lane swap changes that they made, all those weird ass, buffs to durability on the health and armor of the top turrets, so you couldn't lane swap. That'd be great. I would change those things immediately.
I've got an idea for you. This is just I'm just throwing this out there. It's not even a thing that was ever in League, but because here's the problem. I am a hardcore aficionado of any game I follow. So for example, in League, I don't give a shit. I would just make it the hardest game possible, and I would just allow the old thing with unlimited wards and oracles and that. But here's the compromise I came up with. What if the compromise to make the pro scene the same game as the casual players, but slightly different in how you apply it? Because what I'm doing is applying Counter-Strike thinking here. One of the things that Valve tends to fuck up with is they balance the game as if you were an individual player in a matchmaking game with like teammates you don't know. And so it's this gun against that gun, or this utility against. But what they miss is that in the pro scene, we have a team of 5 players who work together and can do things like you can get the pistols, but you can have 3 people behind the corner, can't you? So increase the chance you get a kill. So now it's no longer about, is this gun balanced 1v1? What happens if 3 people have it? So similar logic. Here's what I would suggest as a compromise in League. You should essentially, Monty, be able in spawn or on the map, you should be able to give your wards to the jungler. But make it like the trinket. Idea. So then he collects them all up as he's doing his paths, and then he's got more wards. So that would, I notice I haven't broken like the old one. There's a limited
That's a good idea.
But I've made like a compromise where it's like a teamwork element. I think that would be amazing. What an interesting detail that could be. Because essentially, increasing jungle like agency, I think, as long as it's not just about killing people, which is all jungle became, if you actually increase it as in like the way it interacts with that, I think that's one of the coolest parts of League.
Yeah. I mean, I love that because I love macro. In your opinion, which player on which team was the biggest one-man carry / 1v9 player ever? Has to be Uzi, right? He was making world finals being
in League
an insane carry. Yeah,
he's
in
up
League,
there for sure. I mean, Knight's very good. Who else?
But in terms of like
at times rookie.
1v9 player. I mean, I think Uzi made world finals with like 2 different rosters where he was 1v9.
Oh.
What 3 esports do you most enjoy watching for their gameplay, disregarding production history, popularity, narratives, etc.? Brood War, Counter-Strike, Warcraft 3? Probably.
Thing is, the joke is, I actually don't think I would pick Brood War because a lot of what I loved about it was also the fact that it was like Koreans played it and the storylines were amazing and everyone like the actual
the gameplay. I'm an RTS
the actual
guy, so.
Like raw aesthetic. I was never a big RTS fan, so I never found that part as exciting. Like actually for me, that's the reason why one of the reasons essentially why I could never tolerate StarCraft 2 is it took me a long time as someone who comes from FPS games to appreciate why people thought the Brood War micro was so impressive. It's like he's barely doing anything, he's moving a guy back and forth. In StarCraft 2, they weren't even doing that. They were just sending the units and they just go and the video game just, it's like I'm watching fucking like Final Fantasy when I do an attack. It's like, roll the die. Oh, you did not get the hit. Like, what is this shit? So I don't think Brood War was ever that crazy for me. So I guess for that, if we're going off pure game elements, maybe I would even put like Street Fighter or something. I always thought that was pretty impressive when someone does like those insane parries or fucking, I always thought that was quite impressive to look at aesthetically, you know?
Yeah, I'm an RTS guy, so I just love Brood War. from the gameplay perspective. How much do you think that Faker versus Ryu clip hurt Ryu's career and mental? As we remember him of the other Zed. I mean, he's had a really successful career overall,
He's had
and he's
amazing
also a
longevity,
coach
yeah.
now. Like, he's the coach of KT, and KT did super well. He's not the coach of KT. Who's he coaching? Liv Sandbox?
Yes, Liv Sandbox.
Sandbox.
Yes.
Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think he's been very successful and continues to be. I don't think he's that. I mean, I know him. He's a pretty low key guy. I don't think he's.
By the way, that must be one thing you appreciate, Monty. That like low key history has sort of borne you out as right, because almost everyone in that KT Rolster B team is now like a fucking coach of like an LCK team or some shit like that. Like essentially, they're just spread about across the league now, and they are like chess pieces ruling all the game.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love that
macro
team.
knowledge must have been legit. It was just legit, apparently.
Yeah. I love that team. What are some of the biggest bait
Also, by the
picks?
way, as an aside, if you actually, I don't know Ryu obviously personally because he speaks Korean, I don't. But from the people who've been teammates of him, I actually get the sense of all the players. He's someone actually that just rolled off his back and didn't give a shit about that. Ryu actually does have that mentality. He just seems like he can just get past it. He doesn't seem like he's the guy haunted by that, like maybe Deft would be or something, you know. I actually think he never let that bother him, mate.
Yeah, he's transitioned his career really effectively as well. What are some of the biggest bait picks in LoL history? I have a hatred for Season 7 AD Kennen. Well, Jungle Rumble has to be one of them because a lot of it's not that it was bad. It's just that a lot of teams were bad at using it. Mid Galio at certain times has been that as well, where it takes a specific style of gameplay and a specific player in order to do that well in the mid lane. Some of the mages bot, like Vladimir or Syndra bot, when that was popular, like some players, even though it was good, could still not play it. So they got baited into it.
I think a lot of the melee mid champions have been fucking baits. Like the amount of times I've seen someone in LPL make like a fucking Renekton look awesome, and then I see like the Perks game or something like this is a fucking travesty. So definitely some of the mid melee ones were fucking nightmares to watch.
Yeah. Let's see here. Are there any names that have been forgotten or never got their praise for having big contributions to esports, like the unsung heroes?
Sure. Yeah. Not least because here's the thing. The reason why I personally think raw creativity is actually overrated in esports is esports isn't about being the first to have an idea. Oftentimes the first to have the idea isn't the best guy. It's the guy who refines it and makes it world class. That's what I'm impressed by. So if you don't know, loads of the shit in League and CS and StarCraft, a lot of the tricks weren't invented by the best players. They just took them and refined them. So like, for example, there's a guy in Brood War who was on the same team as Savior, who I think is the one they all credit as doing like the muta micro against the Scourge, like how you do that little trick or whatever. Like there's some people where like they're not even famous players. You wouldn't even know the name, seriously, like the alias if I told you. But like, yeah, there's people who've had like massive effects on the game. Think about some of the Counter-Strike things people figured out, or some of the tricks in League. Like that's why it actually so unsatisfying in League, because when the player goes, I was the first to bring this into my region. You go and look, and it was just some no-name one trick that actually did it on the ladder, and he saw him do it and went, "You made this, I made it," and then he just plays it in LCS, doesn't he?
Yeah. All right. You guys are asking anime questions again. This goes back to the point about doing additional shows. I am open to doing anime shows because there's a question about Monster, which is a series that I really like, and there's a question about Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which I haven't seen, but I think you've seen, or have you said you liked it?
I always recommend, yeah.
These are long conversations, guys, and maybe there is a world where we do some sort of like anime specific content.
Also, by the way,
on the network.
Legend of the Galactic Heroes, unironically, it's like 120 episodes.
I mean, Monster is enormously long as well. That's the problem, guys. Is like if we really have to commit to this, and we only have so much time, and we have to spend a ton of time watching esports and making this content for you. So 100 episode animes are.
I have got a good answer for you though. I'll give you some free entertainment, which is if you know anything about other esports games, here's why what you all think would be the dream would be way more underwhelming than you think. You all think that because these players in esports are so brilliant, and they are in the game, some of them are geniuses at what they can do in the game. You all think naively fuck, imagine being friends and talking to that guy. That's the least interesting part about that guy. And what you would find is it would be so underwhelming. So I'll give you a little detail right now. Recently, Simple, easily, by the way, the greatest CSGO player. I think just the greatest Counter-Strike player ever. In fact, for me, he might even just be the best person to ever play esports. He's that talented. And in the game, he is unbelievably good. Like, he is just Neo in the Matrix. He's just one with the game and can do anything, no matter how impossible. Outside of the game, he recently said in an interview, he can't even believe that the anime Naruto exists because it's too good and too well written. That is the fucking intellectual capacity of maybe the greatest esports player of all time. Not even the good ones. He can't even believe that Naruto can exist. By the way, probably the most filled shit show of all time.
Well,
that if you're not 14, well, DBZ was the original, wasn't it? If you're not 14, like, why are you raving about this? Dude, he even comes from fucking Eastern Europe. Like, you're not talking about, like, War and Peace or fucking Dostoevsky. Naruto's your level. Like, mate, that embarrasses me in esports, mate. Fucking hell. Bloody hell. Bloody hell.
Interesting question. Would corporal punishment be effective for NA esports players in increasing their performance? On a real note, does the extreme style of coaching from Whiplash work in Western esports? Okay, here's the thing about Whiplash. The character in Whiplash buys into the abusive style of teaching. Like, the drummer is insanely driven himself, and the teacher realizes that he responds very well to this brutal training in order to be better. And so is it abusive when you are opting in? You are literally, like, because the drummer could walk away. He could leave the school. It's not like he's required to be there, right? And yet every time when he's faced with this adversity that the teacher presents him with, it drives him to go to the next level because he is so determined to increase his skill. So the answer to this question is, you have to find the unique relationships, and it absolutely can take a driven person to the next level. Is it ethical? That's the question. I think if both parties are bought in and there is a clear opt-out to that situation, it can be considered ethical. I don't know.
Essentially, like the work equivalent to BDSM.
Yeah, exactly.
So the problem in that scenario is this. It's actually a topic that I think has so much legs and so many things you could discuss. It's not politically expedient and people's feelings will get hurt. So here's one of the obvious reasons why this topic is actually a valuable question. Because if you actually look, the closest thing to Whiplash is the LPL. That is just how they coach their teams. Everyone's seen the clip with the Maokai guy where he goes in the script, tells them all they're shit and he's shit, and that they're all fucking up the whole game. Like, he doesn't do that. Like, the joke is, they would never, Monty, they released that clip themselves in that documentary. Like, that would be like a leak from TSM that would get someone, like, fined or fired or something. That's just another fucking day in the LPL. So first of all, it already exists. But the downside is this. If it turns out you're being mean to the player, and are you ready? Think about Danny. You might even be affecting his mental condition, and he might even get depressed or in some hard snap. No one's going to want that. So it doesn't matter that the results might be good. No one's willing to accept what the price is. So the real problem with this topic is this, Monty, because it's a bigger topic in society, obviously. It's not that I'm in favor of corporal punishment. I think many elements about it are brutish and horrible, and surely there's a better way. But that reminds me so much, Monty, of all these fucking LCS teams telling me that they don't need to work like the LPL does because they're going to work smarter instead of harder. And it's like, you've never accomplished it. You've never managed it so far. So I do think there must be a way without corporal punishment to make young men become structured and disciplined and all that stuff. It's just that I've yet to see what it is. Like, maybe it's maybe, in fact, by the way, maybe that's even the next level shit. Maybe the real genius in esports will be someone in 10 years who comes along, who makes like a youth system incorporating like Waldorf and fucking Montessori concepts. And they make like the most next level way of learning the game from, maybe it's true. But our problem is this. I don't know that it's like, I don't like many elements, but I can't argue with the results. That's all I'll say.
Right. And you guys just have to understand that the price of greatness in competitive disciplines or in art is insane work ethic and practice. Like, the whole thing about Whiplash is that it's based off of Charlie Parker, the insane saxophonist. I mean, he was said to practice like 15 or 16 hours a day, every day for years. And that's how he kind of broke the mold of jazz and created, he's one of, if not the most influential jazz musician of all time, because he created a new way of playing jazz that nobody had ever seen before. And it was a vast stylistic departure. He was a virtuoso, but he also just fucking died of like cirrhosis of the liver and his massive like alcohol and drug problems and health issues. He was a deeply unwell human being, but that was the price of getting this insane musical gift out of him. And like, that's the concept of whiplash. And the thing is that the more you applaud these people for this drive, the more they do it, the more they destroy themselves. And then, you are partially responsible for those results.
As far as I can tell, as someone who spent a lot of time studying like the stories and the careers and the biographies of people who are expert, elite level, great sportsmen of all time, essentially the real secret to being the best at a sport is that you are it is more important to you to be the best in the sport than to have a good life. If you understand that statement, you understand the trade-off these people are choosing to make. And by the way, I once heard like a Kobe interview, which reminded me of my own scenario in esports. He said something like that if you're trying to compete with him, he's won already because you're going to spend time with your friend. You're going to go see your family. You're going to watch a movie. He's not doing that. He's just sleeping, eating, spends 1 hour with his kids, and he goes and trains again. I used to do the same thing, Monty. In esports, here's what's funny. One of the reasons I never let people like make me feel inferior because I was a nerd, it's because it was my advantage. When I used to go to events and there'd be another journalist there who's trying to compete with me, and he has a girlfriend and he watches anime and he plays the game 50 hours a week and he does all this and he's social, you can't possibly beat me because all the time you're doing that, I'm researching. I'm doing another interview. I'm researching the next thing. I'm watching your interview to figure out what you didn't ask to ask him either. You can't beat me in that scenario. I would beat your heads up anyway. But now I've just got an impossible advantage. So what you have to understand is this. I'm not that person anymore. Now I do want a balanced life and I want to have a life outside of esports and I want to have time where I work at these hours and these. But I'll tell you what. I can't argue with the results again. Those were the years when I was blasting every number. Those were the years when, even as a non-pro, I was ahead of every ex-pro trying to be an analyst of fucking Counter-Strike, a game I've never played professionally.
It's
so
also
the results is hard to argue with, like you say. It's hard to argue with.
I mean, you also built your foundation of knowledge in that era, so it's not like those skills that you spend time grinding
from it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same thing with me. It's like the reason why I was the best League of Legends broadcast analyst in the world when I was casting at OGN was because I was casting every game of the best league. Then I was coaching a professional team, so I was an insider, and I was like streaming or watching all of the other games from around the world. It's the same reason why Kadril is like the best analyst right now. He's broadcasting one of the leagues, doing a large number of those games. Plus, he's co-streaming LCK and LPL. It's why Dom is an expert. I mean, these guys just grind the game harder than anybody else. And like, I'm not the best analyst in the world anymore, but I'm still pretty good because I watch so many of the games these days. And so that's, but I Dom and Kadril are more knowledgeable about the game than I am right now. Now, I have different takes and I bring a different vibe to the analysis than those guys do because I frame the game a different way in my mind, and I can pull from all of my historical knowledge of the scene in order to make interesting comparisons and do these shows. So it's just different, but that's the way that you really, grind out this stuff.
By the way, I also agree with you on that, though. Like, it's not like now I don't benefit from all those years. Obviously, a lot of that builds up. It's why I actually have started doing, as a way to frame it, I do my own paraphrase on the Picasso line about when he did a sketch for that woman, which is people think I'm lying when I say it. You know those videos, like the one I did about Deft, and I did one about Device, and I did one about like losers in CSGO, those short hype videos that are like 3 to 5 minutes where I narrate them. This is not a joke, guys. From the moment I sit down with the idea, write the script and record it, it is less than 30 minutes. But that sounds either impossible or like, wow, I'm a genius. I'm not. That didn't take 30 minutes. That took 22 years and 30 minutes. If you understand that principle, now you understand how hard it is to achieve mastery.
It's like Robin Williams. Robin Williams spent so much time doing all these different characters, working on his voice work, his comedic skills, that he could be so entertaining immediately. But it's not that he was a genius. It's just that he had done so many iterations of these things over the years that he has a giant bag of tricks to pull from. So it's about creating your bag of tricks, basically. How did Tabe go from leaking strategies on a public broadcast to being the coach of a great team? You'd think he'd be a persona non grata after that incident. I don't think they really took it. Was on an English language stream that he leaked those strategies. I think he's still very knowledgeable at the game, former professional player. It's not that big of a deal.
They also just seem to have weird like ways of who they kick out and who they keep in that scene. Because if people don't know, even before the leak in the strats, Tabe himself had a bunch of things. Like, if people don't know, before he was on Royal Club, he was on like I think IG, and him and like Whites like fucked the whole team up and like Rick like left the last minute or so. They were doing there was loads of like scandals over the years. So bizarrely in the LPL, I'm not quite sure what the actual rationale is for what gets you kicked out forever. Because so, on the one hand, like you have that scenario where like as far as I can tell, and it's based on some things I've heard. When Bo got banned for match fixing, I've heard he might not even have done it, or maybe he was the one who did it the least, and maybe he even by coming forwards, that's why they put like
right.
it's such a different world, guys. I can't really figure out the reasons in their world. They just have their
it
own
might
way
be
of
a
thinking.
Chinese cultural thing. I have no idea.
Yes.
Now that we're starting to see VA go, I feel like the disable changed the course of the split in some regions. Which champion disable in history was the most impactful? This one's easy, guys. It's when they fucking disabled Gangplank. So they did the Gangplank rework, right? And Riot decided to do a story event where Gangplank was killed. So they disabled him in solo queue, but kept him enabled for professional play. So nobody could actually practice him in solo queue. So you could only practice him in scrims. And obviously that changed for the professional scene a lot because you had to, it was the teams that he was very OP, by the way. He was very strong in this new iteration. And so if you got into scrims and you were unlucky and it was banned, you never got to practice with it or against it. And then you got into a professional game where somebody was playing it potentially for the first time. Like you may not have known how strong it was. It was the stupidest shit of all times. They literally disabled Gangplank for lore reasons. And that was easily the biggest champion disable in history. Also, the world where Gragas was like disabled halfway through was also super bad. That was a very bizarre scenario.
I mean, the joke is you can actually invert the question, though. It's when they didn't disable MonteCristo for that world. That's what actually ruined me. That was the worst one of all time, wasn't it?
It seems like they're getting better, though. Props to them for disabling Yuumi for MSI. You love to hear it. Monty, what are some of your favorite national parks that I've been to? I mean, I love national parks.
I mean, I assume there's one in Colorado, right? There must be a big one there.
There's 4 in Colorado. I grew up right next to Rocky Mountain National Park. I've been to Great Sand Dunes. There's Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Maybe there's only 3. Oh, there's Mesa Verde. I've been to Mesa Verde as well. So love Mesa Verde. Love Joshua Tree. What else do I like? Arches in Utah is beautiful. And I've been to so many of these, honestly. Grand Canyon is stunning. I've hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, stayed at Phantom Ranch down there. A lot of the ones in the West. I used to live, I lived very briefly in Maine, right next to Acadia National Park, which is the only national park in New England. But a lot of them are in the West and just absolutely gorgeous. If you guys are unfamiliar, so I'm a huge Ken Burns documentary fan, and he did a really awesome documentary on the national parks and the formation of the national parks, and Yosemite and Yellowstone being the first couple that were there, and how John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt really pushed for that. And I think, for me, the national parks are one of the best things about America and American culture, because you have to remember that before the national parks existed, and national parks now exist all over the world in different countries, but America was the first, is that all of these like natural reserves were held by nobility. Like in England, they were private natural reserves for hunting or for the nobles. And so what is one of the best parts of America was that they democratized the preservation of natural beauty and made it so that people could have access to these things and encouraged people to go. And for me, especially as somebody who is from the American West, it is such a quintessential part of who I am, that I deeply love it. And that's one of the reasons why I really like Teddy Roosevelt as a president. And I think it's just a core American belief and one of the things that makes me most proud to be an American, honestly.
All I'll say is this, just due to some rabbit holes I've been down, does sound like a good idea that these are cool places you can go and experience nature and stuff. I would just say, just keep a close eye on everyone. That's all I'm going to say. Keep a close eye on it. Don't think just because you're in nature, everything's safe. Just keep a close eye on everyone. Keep track of where everyone is. That's all I'm going to say.
Out of all the different esports, who are some of the players that, in your opinion, managed to successfully create an interesting brand / persona for themselves? Like player brands. I mean, I loved Imps. Imps was hilarious.
I mean, I've got to be real. One of the most obvious ones actually is LS. If people don't know, LS used to play all the games first. He wasn't trying to be like an analyst. Like that was a mega pivot. Like Imp's a good one. Let me think. I'm trying to think of some of the more weird people though, because is that like? Let me think. Like I think, for example, you can put people like Jizuki at this mix, mate. I think Jizuki's mega entertaining. Not only in the game as a personality, he's got that ridiculous, like he just laughs at everything. Basically, I think he's mega personality. He's fucking sick.
Yeah, Jizuki is super funny right now. I agree.
Perks is a good one. I think Perks is somehow what Perks has nailed. By the way, here's the sad thing. If this was like UFC, Perks is Conor McGregor, and he would make all the money. Because, dude, he's mastered that thing of like, if you're going to be a champion, you either have to be the babyface and everyone has to love you. But Perks' style is he's like Triple H. He's like the shit-eating grin as he's then the champion. Like, that's brilliant because that does the G2 thing of polarizing. You get all your fans who like you winning, and then everyone who hates you obsessively follows you. And the joke is, like, I don't think you guys realize the idea Perks was still one of the like into a top LCS team, but anytime he lost, all of Reddit had to discuss like, was he a fraud? That just means he's won the marketing battle. It's over. He just wins automatically. As soon as you make that thread, he won.
Well, also Ocelot, who turned his entire brand into G2. Yeah. Really good one.
Yeah.
Next, as someone who hasn't played League in 7 years and mostly follows competitive through your content / plus finals, MSI, and Worlds, I hate Aphelios since I will never get what he does. Yes, he's very badly designed from a understanding from watching perspective.
But this way, the only reason I even sort of softened on Aphelios, like I said, is because I just know some of the best ADCs and they explained like how they use it. If I hadn't done that, I'd also just think it was shite. Like I wouldn't have any clue what they were doing.
So the problem with Aphelios is I do think it's a very good champion for skill expression. I do think his design is incredibly opaque and non-intuitive, and no one will ever really understand what he does. So in your opinion, was the worst designed champion in League of Legends? So like I said, from a gameplay perspective, I don't think Aphelios is badly designed. It's from a readability perspective that he's fucking terrible.
Yuumi we have to ignore Yuumi, obviously. So
yeah,
if we go beyond that, aside. What are you going to take beyond that? What's really badly designed?
Beyond Aphelios? I mean, Zeri's pretty bad.
Zeri's just too simplistic to me.
The problem with Zeri that I find is that identifying the difference between the Q and the auto attack, as well as what her ult actually does, is a little weird. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, things that also change, like their ults change based on different conditions, like Kiana is pretty weird.
I'll just say it. It's not just coincidentally because Adam plays it, but I've always thought Darius is absolute ass, mate. Like it's just too feast and famine. Like if everyone remembers that famous balls pentakill,
what he does, though.
Like that balls pentakill just invalidates the ideas that like all pentakills are created. Who gives a shit? You just belly drag in and hit you like brilliant. Yeah. Oh, how skilled! Oh, they're fucking insane.
All right. Peter Dunn is often praised for his ability to shape a team based on their personnel and provide them with structure and identity. He's also great at scouting and training young prospects into good players with a proven track record with young NA talent. Since T1 is an NA org with young talent, do you think Peter is the answer to T1's playoff underperformance? No, because he doesn't speak Korean. Oh, jokes aside, do you think T1 needs a new head coach / coaching staff? Should they try to poach Score, or do you think bring back a coach like Koma or Nofe? I think they need a new drafting coach. I would start there. Like their drafts have been a little bit weird, especially in finals. And I think they need a firmer hand in the draft because they are not identifying issues that they have in their performance quickly enough, which leads them to lose additional games in high stakes matches. And they are overconfident. The players appear to be overconfident when they are underperforming, which causes them to lose in critical situations.
I also think as well, you're doing too much of a Western thinking there. Like, I don't even know if Score would leave KT and go to T1. One, he's a KT man, like almost his whole career.
Well, Genji,
and two,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Genji, sorry, yeah. But like, no, in this scenario though, like Genji gave him the shot. Like he was nobody, you know, was unpopular. Genji, was to bring players in.
Genji not only gave him the shot, but they gave him total control of the team. And he's made 3 consecutive finals and won 2 of them, guys. Like, why would he go to a team that he's beaten 2 out of 3 times?
That's just Western thinking, guys. I think he's going to be way more loyal than that. Come on, that would be my take.
And also, like, he just has more control over that roster. If you go to T1, you will always be second fiddle to Faker. Faker is, again, the real coach of that team. He will always have the last word. Is there a game that came out in recent past that you would like to have had more success, popular in both West and East, so that it could rise to become another great esport to follow and possibly create content for? Man, I would love another RTS. Like we've talked about this. Another RTS that was globally popular would be great. I'm hoping that Counter-Strike 2 has more popularity in Asia, because we talked about this previously. One of the big tells to the fact that Valve was going to release a new version of Counter-Strike was that they secretly deployed new servers in Korea for CSGO. Didn't make any sense. Why would they do that? It's not in PC box. So if Valve has a real plan for rolling out in the internet cafes in Korea with this new server for the new game next year, if they've got a really good promotion plan, it could be absolutely huge in Korea. They like tac shooters, they like military shooters. They could be primed to really take over the market.
I just don't believe that Valve understands how China and Korea works. I've yet to see it ever happen. If it happens, the joke is, people are going to think I'm trolling, but I'm actually being serious. I think it would have been cool if Overwatch had become really big.
Yeah,
unironically. I actually liked that game.
And it was played worldwide too. I mean, the player base is very large for that game.
People
it's larger
don't know,
than Valorant.
One of the most underrated parts of Overwatch was the skill expression. Dude, if you were some player like the Widowmaker player, you were a very skilled player. You could dominate a game. It was fucking sick.
Also allowed for a lot of different forms of skill expression based on class. So yeah, obviously that would have been nice for me personally. In your opinion, does esports have a Mecca location that everyone hopes to play at least one game in, like Lambeau Field, Maracana Stadium?
Probably just go to Korea, I would guess, is the main thing for most people.
Any final in Korea?
Yeah.
Any final in Korea?
That's it, right?
Yep. Favorite short story collections? I'm not a really big short story guy. It's never really been my jam.
I'm pretty sure you actually bought me one. Didn't you buy me one that was a Borges one?
Yeah, Borges. I love Borges.
People don't know. Essentially, Borges, if you've never read it, the reason why it's good is because, one, they're short stories, so they're not a massive commitment. And then two, it's essentially like a more literary Twilight Zone episode. That would be the way I'd phrase it, but really clever concepts and ideas. Yeah.
And it is 420. If you guys wanted to read a 420 short story, Borges, it's like a lot of like crazy mind puzzles, and it's really fun stuff. Really fun stuff. Would having no restrictions on the number of imports actually help LCS perform better internationally? We've already talked about this, actually.
Oh, by the way, as an aside, the other one I'll throw in for short stories is just Sherlock Holmes. You can just go and buy one book. It's complete stories. They're short. They're really short, guys.
Yeah, very fun, for sure. If you were to pick any minor or major region in LoL and power rank the teams based on their performance relative to money spent, what would it be? Well, it's going to be China and Korea because they've spent money, but they've also delivered the results. It's probably Korea had the best value. I mean, DRX had insane value last year. It's not like they were paying those guys any money.
No, there's no way.
So to win
the
Worlds,
joke, if people don't know, the craziest thing about the Worlds win for DRX is I would guess that was their down year. If you look at the players they had previous years, that looked like that was the budget year, but they just fucked around and won Worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
And then didn't even sign the players again.
Can we get a video about Riot's absurdly shallow statement about their commitment to esports? You just got it, baby.
We could maybe work some out for you.
We'll only spend an hour and a half talking about it. For us LFN nephews, what Brood War SC2 match would you recommend that is epic and fun to watch? Oh, man.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of any of the Savior finals. I mean, the Flash Jaedong rivalry was a really fun one to follow. Man, that is, you're talking about like, 15 years of history, though. I'd have to go back, honestly.
Let me think. Even though it's the one that ends with that ominous thing with like the lights go out, the NAT MSL final was a banger up until that point. It had like 3 games that were really good. For StarCraft 2, I'm not as big a fan of StarCraft 2, but I would say the classic one is just go to 2012 and watch all the big series that Stefano wins, because he was like a very like enigmatic, iconic player who played off intuition and feel and could have very high APM too. So essentially the way he would win against like Koreans was just really cool to watch, basically.
I mean, honestly, the answer to this question is like tweet at Artosis and ask him, because he'll give you a bunch. Why does LEC insist on having the final so close to international tournaments? This year, they even had that random break. Why you guys are asking all the questions we already answered. So go back. Best way to get into the NFL for someone who has only casually watched over the years.
Oh, I can give you this. It's basically It'll help a lot if you've ever followed a game like CSGO or Attack FPS. What you need to do essentially is just view each of the downs like it was the T side in Counter-Strike and someone's trying like whatever execute or whatever push they're going to do. Because essentially it's the same game. You read the defense, you have your own playbook, you pick the play that makes the most sense. Within that, a player can have a little bit of wiggle room. Maybe the wide receiver puts an extra bit of mustard on the beginning of the route, but he's still going for the same route. So there's one area because that'll get you like the basics of what other teams doing over and over again. And then, in my opinion, in every sport or esport, you find the player that is just incredibly compelling to you. Something about their skill set, their story makes you want to follow them because following them through their eyes, you'll learn the rest of the sport. You'll learn the other roles in the game as they interact with them. You'll learn the defense. You'll learn the opponents. You'll see what other people who play as well. So I think there's the two ways you do it. You do like one is you kind of get a basic sense of the sport, and then two, pick a player and see the game through his eyes. That's my style.
Yeah, there's also just some good.
There's a lot of good YouTube channels as well.
There's a lot of good analysis out there, like
Yes.
Kurt Warner, the former professional quarterback for the Rams. He was a Super Bowl winner with like the greatest show on turf. He's been doing like some really good breakdown and analysis. He's got a channel called Kurt Warner and QB Confidential. That he does like scouting. Right now, I'm just looking at it right now. He's doing scouting of some of the top like quarterback candidates from college that are going to be drafted this year. But honestly, like a lot of his content is super good if you want to get into the nitty gritty. There's another guy. I'm trying to find him. I forget his name. I follow him on Twitter. Let me look real quick. Let me try to find this guy.
I mean, there's a bunch of
Jenkins.
on YouTube.
Yeah, Tim Jenkins. He's at T Jenkins Elite on Twitter, and he does some super cool kind of like X and O breakdowns where he explains a lot of this stuff. He's got a YouTube channel as well, but these are some people that really do a very good job of like talking about why certain teams are doing well or their analysis of the game with footage. So yeah, there you go.
Oh, I've got some bad news, Monty. We're gonna have to pay for Twitter Blue. They've just taken all the blue check marks off. Just as we're speaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you grew your account now. Won't have it.
Oh boy,
we've been yanked. Well, we're back to anonymity.
We've been yanked now. Now the algorithm will hate us even more. Whatever will we do? A couple weeks ago, I asked who at LFN should be the next Bond. So my question this week is who at LFN for comedic person would be the next Bond girl? Who's the hot young thing in LFN? Maybe Maui Snake, the up and coming star.
Obviously, he's a bit more in the odd job category there. I don't give a fuck. If you don't know me, you have to just live with it. If this is who I am, I don't give a fuck, man.
Who are some players that your eye test didn't rate very highly, but still had successful careers where they weren't just carried by others? Doenby? Oh. He looks a lot better now, or did while he was still playing.
I mean, an obvious one to me is like Paul Belter. I never thought the eye test really ever screams anything special, but look how many fucking yeah, there's another one. Look how many finals they were in. Oh, it's very impressive, yeah.
Who favorite Western music soundtracks? I mean, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is obvious. Like the Ennio Morricone soundtracks are fucking insanely good.
What's sad is because of League of Legends, I just took Western to mean like in Europe and North America.
Like there, cowboy.
I know what you mean though, yeah.
But I mean, obviously, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and that trilogy of films is absolutely top tier. Let me think of some other ones. I like the new 310 to Yuma soundtrack. I thought was really good. Those are the two that stand out to me right off the bat. All right. In League, we have seen a plethora of potential talents. Who is the greatest unrealized potential star that never made the hype? I mean, it's Apto. Like,
I was going to say the same thing.
There's no other choice, right? Like that is the most disappointing alternate reality of League of Legends that we like. There is, by the way, in the multiverse, there is a universe where Apto becomes Dark Faker, and we have like the best anime plot of all time in League of Legends, where Apto and Faker are fighting each other for like a decade. That would have been fucking
story
insane.
Reminds me of like the urban legends people tell about like certain players, especially in the NBA, where they just like came from a bad background and you went to prison instead of like getting to the NBA. But like people just say like, oh, they were even better than Jordan or whatever. Like he's essentially that version in League. Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty easy answer. I mean, another one at least could have been Dardoch, who probably never really hit his ceiling, even though we knew he was really good because of his personality. Conflicting with the team. Peekaboo is obviously another one. Had a very outstanding, very short run in League of Legends. Looked like he was going to be the next great Korean support player, and then just quit. Those are some good ones, I think. All right, that was our last question for this week. We will be back for next week, guys, to discuss all things LEC. We'll be back at our normal time on the 25th, so Tuesday live, and with the show coming out Wednesday. I had some other obligations this week, so couldn't do Tuesday, but we'll be back at the normal time then, and that'll roll us right into MSI, basically. We'll be announcing a new schedule for this show for MSI, because obviously that's going to be determined by the play-in stage, and like Worlds, it will have to look at the schedule and see where we can slot this show in that makes sense, because the week after that will be the second, and that'll be the first day of MSI, so there will not be an SI episode that day because the games will be happening. So anyway, thanks guys for watching. See you next week.